You're listening to Power Athlete Radio, a podcast dedicated to empowering your performance every damn day. Join former NFL pro and Power Athlete founder John Welborn as he dissects the greatest minds in strength, conditioning, and more. So whether your goal is to be the hammer, destroy mediocrity, or simply move the dirt, you've come to the right place. Now with the warm-up done, let the gains begin.
Hey, Power Athlete Nation. I want to welcome you to the Mind of George and introduce you to my good friend, Mr. George Bryant. George is a Renaissance man in the true sense of the word. Growing up, he was homeless, he was bullied, he was abused. He became a U.S. Marine, got into combat, got into CrossFit, got into paleo, became a New York Times bestselling author and a 7-figure entrepreneur while dealing with PTSD and being a family man, and really one of the most intelligent gurus in terms of marketing and brand positioning, and really the type of individual that you want on your team if you're building a business. George and I have an incredible friendship, and I count him as one of my mentors. I'm excited to have him in the studio and do a live episode of Power Athlete Radio with George. So hopefully buckle in on this one, and you'll see some of the amazing depth and just beauty that is the Mind of George. Tune in. Well, dude, thanks for coming to Power Athlete Radio, man. I feel like this is a long time coming, and it's exciting to sit here with you and one of my favorite people in the world.
Yeah, dude, I'm honored. I'm humbled. I was like stoked. I was in the studio with your guy this morning, and I was like, let's have studio tech talk.
I seriously was going to come down here and thought that the whole place would have been rearranged. Jacob would have been dressed like Zoolander. Everything would have been redone, and I came in and the lighting looks amazing.
I know. I'm pretty stoked on it.
Yeah.
That little techie part of my heart gets like all geeked out. So,
well, I knew I got a glimpse into the life of George when we were on the motorcycle ride, and the influencer girl was like, hey, can you take a picture? And like, next thing you know, out of nowhere, there were like cameras and lighting and ring light. You did her hair and makeup. She's like doing this photo shoot. And I'm like looking at my clock. I'm like, what the fuck just happened? And like, George is like impromptu. There was a fucking smoke machine. This girl all of a sudden went from like, pretty girl looking this to like looking like something on like the cover of Maxim magazine, which I don't even know exists anymore. But I was like, holy shit, dude, that girl like lucked out. Hey, like, you take a picture?
I know. It was so, man, but I felt bad. She got thrown in. All of us knew each other.
Oh, I felt bad for that girl.
This motorcycle influencer gets filmed with us, Matt, Vincent, you, me, Bonnie, and she's like, who are you mutants?
Well, and then the other issue is the bike was too big for her.
Huge.
So, and she wasn't a small girl, but it's still a big fucking bike.
Huge. It was like a 1,300-pound motorcycle.
Yeah. And every time she would turn, she would dump it. And then either George and I would jump off and get it up. And then the poor girl went off, and we tried to make all these U-turns. Because when you're shooting on a motorcycle deal, you ride like a glory ride, and then you stop, and then you got to ride back and make U-turns. And like, there's 10 times to get like the one shot. Yeah, the one shot, the guys in the back, and then they got the drone.
Yeah. And everyone's like, oh, it was so nice riding motorcycles, right? I was like, yeah, do you know how many times you ride over the same bridge because you missed the shot, or legal didn't like something, or my visor wasn't closed, or
I remember all that.
They didn't turn the drone on, or the memory card was full. The amount of U-turns that we did on massive highways with no embankments to turn around on 1,300-pound motorcycles.
Well, and that's why I knew Bonnie didn't want to be on the back of that bike, because that had to be scary as shit to be basically perched on the back of that bike just making U-turns. I'm like, she's like, I want to sit in the van. This is too stressful. I'm like, I'm stressed watching Matt make U-turns with you on the back.
Yeah, and like we're not talking like we're in downtown San Francisco in rush hour traffic with 6 motorcycles and 2 chase vans trying to navigate and film a television show with cameras mounted to the back. No permits.
No,
nothing.
No, I didn't even think about that. Like, do you have to get permits for stuff like that?
I'm pretty sure, but based on how that show went, it checks out.
Dude, when we stopped in Cambria, I remember we were sitting at that restaurant, and I like started looking at Redfin, and I like saved it. And so at least like once a week, I'll get like an email blast of homes in Cambria. Mm-hmm. And every time I click through I send it to my wife and I show it to him, because to this day, that might be one of the most beautiful places I've ever been.
It was beautiful. The whole trip was such an experience.
Well, the cool part was when we cut over Cambria, and then we dropped in and we came through that like the valley into like Central California, Bakersfield, that whole area. That was so cool. I mean, there wasn't anybody within 100 miles of that place.
No, we got every climate. We had like rain. We basically almost had snow. It was cold enough. We got blown in like a dust storm across the side of the ocean.
Yeah.
Redwoods. Yeah. Water. I mean, it was crazy what we covered.
Yeah, it was amazing. my biggest regret is it's not an annual trip minus the cameras.
Yeah.
That we should just go and do it just for the mere fact that there was probably nothing that I've done. And the better part is, I'm sure like you, like Matt called and he's like, hey, and I'm like, I don't know if I can cut out. And he's like, dude, everybody's flaking. I need you to come. And I was like, fine, I'll be there. And I even apologized. I'm like, I'm so sorry that you almost had to like threaten me to come and have a good time.
Yeah.
I was like, what the fuck is wrong with our lives?
Yep. Sometimes I forget, like you said this, somebody said this to me yesterday, like it's okay to say no. Mm-hmm. And I was looking and we talked about this when we were filming, and we basically got told we can talk about whatever we want, and then we couldn't. So we just talked a lot, and we were like, how crazy it is that like we just have to use a television show to get a group of our friends together to go spend 7 days together.
That's
And then I was like, and then I think about it a lot, and I was like, yeah, because he called the same way, and I like was kind of on the fence, and then I was like, no, I gotta go. And I was like, wait, I'm an entrepreneur, like let's go do this, right? And like the amount of times that like I think back on that and I'm like, God, that's like such a good lesson. Like I'm not a slave to my calendar. I can change it. It's my world, right? But doing more things like that, like it definitely was a big catalyst for changing how I see things.
How do you balance, family, life, mental, emotional, and all these things with being, world-class entrepreneur and coach and just the, most interesting man in the world?
Yeah. It's I think the first thing is I had a very wise teacher, Dr. Jeff Spencer, and he had me delete the word balance from my vocabulary. And between him and Adam Markell, he's like, this is the thing with you and most high achievers is that when you use the word balance, it sets you up to fail from the get-go because it implies failure if you fall out. Mm-hmm. And there's no failure, right? It's practice doesn't make perfect, practice makes progress, right? And it's really removing any resistance in your life that eliminates your ability to take the next bite from your future. And so he's like, you have to understand that harmony is all you're looking for. And he's like, you're going to have ups, you're going to have downs, but it's harmony. And he's like, so the two challenges that you're having is you measure everything in black and white, and then your measurement windows are too small. You tell me you want to take over the world in 20 years and you're measuring in days and weeks. And so I started to think about things a lot more in harmony and understanding that I relate a lot of entrepreneurship to being a professional athlete. I don't know what it's like to be a professional athlete. Now I've been at a top level of sports and I tied a world record for, athletic feats and things like that. But there's no point in any career where there's ever anybody at the top the whole time, right? It's seasons, there's injuries, there's ups, there's downs, there's good days, there's sore days. And I think people paint this illusion of what it's like to be an entrepreneur and what they think it should look like rather than understanding what it's really, really like. And they measure themselves against this false paradigm of like what entrepreneurship is. And it's just this constant failure, balance in or out. And so I think it's really just understanding that it comes in seasons. I'm going to have up days. I'm going to have down days. And what's really, really important is on the up days is maximizing them. Like if I'm feeling good and I'm halfway into a workout, like keep going, right? Like if I'm into my podcast, if I'm into this thing, if it's working, like ride that lightning. But then on the days that it's low, protect the progress. And I think that that's probably been the biggest secret for me is realizing that if I look at it like harmony, it's not so much of like, did I do the thing or not do the thing? It's like, okay, can I just make progress today? And so for me, and I talk about this with my clients, my students all the time, and this, for whatever reason, has been the most powerful breakthrough for me and everybody else. But I realized that I was failing in entrepreneurship because I was looking at everything like it was a home run or like it was a grand slam. And I was missing the fact that like base hits win baseball games, right? Like it's about the base hits every single day. And so I was planning my days like every day was my perfect day, right? I'm like, I'm going to work out for an hour today. I'm going to record 3 podcasts today, right? I'm going to have these 3 meetings today. And then I forget that the bigger you scale businesses, the more you get punched in the face every day.
Yeah.
And no matter what, your perfect days don't exist. But most of us plan our days like they're our perfect day, and then we never prioritize and protect them. Mm-hmm. And so I started realizing that when I would set my intention of like, hey, working out is important to me. I need to work out for like an hour a day. I'd look at my calendar and be like, oh shit, I only have 40 minutes. I guess I'll do it tomorrow. And then I would skip the behavior. And so I realized that I was basically taking all these back doors. And so I created this model that I teach everybody called the wedge of expectations. And I was like, what are your baseline behaviors? And this is how I look at it. I look at it like athletes as entrepreneurships. There's the entrepreneur that's you, like me and you as humans, we're entrepreneurs. Like when you were a professional athlete, there was you as the athlete, right? Irregardless of you being in your career in football, like there was you as the athlete, irregardless. And so I always measure myself based on that first, right? So for me, every single day, I break my day down into 4 buckets: my mind, my body, my being, and my business, right? And I ask myself, knowing that irregardless of what happens in my future, I'm still going to be this entrepreneur. I still have a goal or desire to be great in these areas. What are the behaviors that I can do every single day that are going to keep me at the tip of the spear or getting closer, that I can apply to any area of my life or business? And so for those buckets, for me, it's my mindset, my body, my being. Mm-hmm. And so in each one of those areas, I identify what's important to me, right? Like a breathwork practice, a meditation practice, working out every day, building things in my business, working on my dreams. And I identify like 1 to 3 areas in each one. And then in the business one, I ask myself, what are the 3 things that if I guarantee that I do every single day for the rest of my life in business will keep me in business or keep my business going, right? Like what are those 3 needle movers? What are those like 3 behaviors that only I can do in the business, mm-hmm. right? And if you don't know what those are, read the book Clockwork by Mike Michalowicz, incredible book to identify your queen bee role. And so identify those 3 in my business. And so then if I look at it, in my mind, I have 3 things, my body, I have 3 things, in my state of being, which I would consider personal development, right? Mm-hmm. Consciousness work, growth, education, things like that. And then in my business, I have these 3 things. And so then I look at them and I'm like, awesome. And then I ask myself a simple question. On my dream day as an entrepreneur, how much time would I spend or what would I do in each bucket? I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to meditate for 30 minutes, right? I'm going to go spend an hour doing this. I'm going to go to the gym for an hour. I'm going to do 3 podcasts that day, right? And I map out on my best day and I call that my ceiling. And then I change the question. And then I say, on my worst day, I walk out of the house, my dog gets run over, my car gets towed. I find out I'm going bankrupt. I'm losing everything that I've ever had and my wife is leaving me. But I know in that moment that I'm not going to die and that no one's coming to save me and that no one's going to build it for me. No one's going to do the workout for me. And no matter how shitty I feel, I have responsibilities. And if I do nothing, I'm going to lose. So on that day, what's the minimum I can commit to? And so then that's my floor. And so for my mindset, if I have a 1 hour stillness practice, my floor might be 5 minutes. For my workout, if it's an hour of gym, it's a 10-minute walk outside. Sure. For breath work, if it's 30 minutes a day, it's 1 3-minute round. And so then I identify my floors across the board, and then I make those my daily minimums. And so rather than being like, did I get everything done today or did I do it perfect? I protect the progress over everything. And so I just shoot for Pareto's principle every single day. And It's like 80%, right? And so I'd say most days I get within the range. I'm probably more of like 70%. Mm-hmm. And that's been the biggest thing for me because it allows me the space to also have perspective, because I also think that I struggled a lot. And most people do, most people I coach and people we run into all the time, mm-hmm. is that we also tend to think about our businesses when we're in a good headspace, right? We plan the business, we think about the business, we make these plans. But then when we get punched in the face, we lose perspective, right? Because our reticular activating system gets tuned into trauma, and then that's all we see. And we don't have anything in place that helps us remember that perspective, right? And we tend to freeze and get stuck. And then we tend to look for more evidence that makes us more stuck. Wow. And we don't know what to do. And it gets overwhelming. And then we start reacting. We start making decisions based on those reactions and emotions, which aren't going to help. And so I say this to people all the time. I'm like, you can all think of a moment, and especially people listening to this podcast, where like you've been having the worst day of your life. Like you can't have clarity. You don't know what's going on. And then for whatever reason, you felt called to go sweat. You went to the gym, you lifted weights, and literally 4 minutes later, it was like a jigsaw puzzle put itself together in front of you. And then you knew what to do, right? Sure. But I think in entrepreneurship, we forget that the same things can apply. And so we use those tools and those modalities to help us find that clarity again. And so when things get hard, or when you get triggered, or when you feel like you're getting kicked in the face or you're out of balance or harmony, the easiest thing to do is to fall back on something that's not in the business to help you find that perspective again, or help you realize what's actually going on, or help you regulate that emotion, or help you realize like, oh yeah, this sucks, right? Like I just lost my best client, but let's not slash the other 3 tires, because I still have paying clients. I've gotten clients before. I'm still going to have to handle this. It's going to suck. I'm not going to like it, but irregardless, they're not coming back, right? And I'm not closing the business. So the faster I can like give myself the space to find that perspective, the easier it typically is to get back to work. And so for me, it's allowed me to really stay focused on the day-to-day, like the bite by bite, like mile by mile, rather than getting overwhelmed with the gap ahead of me, right?
Sure.
And there's an incredible book on that called The Gap and the Gain by Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy. But I've always kind of been that guy where like, I love the concept of fuzzy vision. Like I've never had like a vision board. I've never had like, boom, I kind of get an idea and I'm like, oh, that sounds good brick by brick, right? Like I want to build it brick by brick and let it go. And I find a lot more clarity that way. I find a lot more confidence that way. And it kind of keeps me focused on taking that progress rather than getting overwhelmed. Because the paradox of all of this too is that, you know, a lot of people want to scale. They want to grow their business. They want to do it. And my buddy Alex Sharfin says this all the time. And he's like, well, you don't have the business that you want because you haven't become the person to run it yet. And I love that, because the paradox of all of it is that the more you do this and the longer you're in the game, the gap between the lessons and the growth periods are bigger, the resistance is greater, and the only secret is really your ability to sit in it.
Sure.
Right? Like that's it. Right? Like if you think about you at the highest level, right? Like the longer you're in, the more experience you have, the more comfortable you are under increasing amounts of pressure.
Yeah.
To keep clarity, to not become overwhelmed by what's happening around you, so that you can find the next logical bite in that moment, whether you're down 30 points with a couple minutes left in the biggest game of your life, right? The only way that you win that is when in those moments you can drown out all the noise and find what you know.
Sure.
And I think as entrepreneurships, that's something that's not talked about, right? Because what we're conditioned to do, oh, something's broken. Let me get you addicted to consuming my shit to convince you how it's broken, and then gaslight you into paying me, and then tell you that it's still broken, and then that you're the reason you can't fix it, right?
and then I secretly are the only one with the tools to help you fix it.
Yeah, and somehow I found Pandora's box and that you can't find, and I'm hiding this secret on the internet that's going to give you the magic pill that's going to do the work. Yeah,
so you pretty much just uncovered most of the internet. With this market.
I think we just dismantled like 97% of it.
Well, isn't there like the entrepreneurial myth? You know, the idea that you have to be grinding 99 hours a day, and you know, there's not even 99 hours in a day unless you find a new way to count time, which a lot of entrepreneurs are claiming to have figured out how to count time differently.
Yeah,
but like it's like 24 hours a day. You know, you don't need to sleep; you just need to grind. And so, I mean, it's kind of it's bullshit.
Well, I think what's even deeper, I think that everybody thinking you can label it or thinking there's one way is bullshit, right? It's like, what's the difference between somebody becoming a professional football player and somebody only playing in college? Yes, sometimes it comes down to skill and ability, but other times it comes down to what they're willing to put in.
Or luck,
right?
Yeah,
like you take like Bo Eason, right? Like to go from the only kid in his high school to ever make it into a professional sports league and then bring 3 people with him and then retire and go get a Broadway play and win an award. Like, you know, but it's like, you can look at that and be like, oh yeah, that was luck. And I'm like, yeah, but also like the willingness to put in that level of work. Or the willingness just to say yes. I mean, think about how many people miss opportunity, like the bus of opportunity, just for the mere fact that they aren't willing to raise their hand, aren't willing to say this, and they just kind of watch it go by and then think, oh, if only it was me. Yeah.
And a lot of times it's just saying, sure, let's do it. Or let me hear more. Or I'll go.
Yeah. And here's the thing. Like, I think what's crazy is putting this label on like the hustle culture. I don't have a problem with hustling. Like if you tell me,
are you a fan of hustle porn? Which the websites on the social media, like Instagram, the hustle porn, like I'm addicted to it. I like whenever I like see it, like Entrepreneur and all these pages, it is so hilarious.
Yeah.
The way they like cast shadows and the dude's got this crazy jaw and like, you know who they're making fun of. I fucking love it.
Yeah. And I think like, it's like if like we were with one of your athletes yesterday, right? Like, and if we looked at him and he spent 20 hours of his day, right? Or let's say 16, because he sleeps a ton, as he should, to be that great. But if he spent the other 16 hours of his day meticulously, intentionally planned so that every single minute was about him becoming and maintaining his world championship, we would celebrate it, right?
Yeah.
All day, right? But in entrepreneurship, what ends up happening is that we have this relationship that everyone's like, oh, you can hustle your way there or work harder. But what really the distinction is the intention and integrity underneath it. You can hustle yourself all day and fucking consume Instagram for 16 hours a day. You're not going to grow your business.
No. And I actually find that negatively infects your business
1,000%.
because it forces you to think as everybody else is thinking.
1,000%.
And I constantly, the minute I can unplug and kind of like delve outside, then it gives me better ideas. I find that like the social media algorithm almost like pigeonholes.
It does. And I'll say, like, I got successful when I stopped consuming content. Like I actually, after drinking ayahuasca, made a rule that I wasn't allowed to consume content for 3 years. I couldn't watch a YouTube video. I couldn't read a book. And it was simple. If I wanted to consume, I had to create first. So I made rules that I had to create 5 pieces of content for every one thing I wanted to consume.
Wow.
And I realized that I'd been consuming for years, but I was basically everybody else. I had just basically taken recipes or items off their menus from their restaurants, slapped it together, and then said, here's my restaurant, and got upset that it didn't work. Rather than taking inspiration and be like, oh, that's a good way to cook it. That's a good way to cook it. I want chicken. I want that. Here's how I'm going to make chicken. But every time something broke, rather than me trying to fix it or try to figure it out, I was like, well, let me go consume content. And then I would find the solution and then 20 other things that I thought were broken. And then I would just get in this consumption cycle. And it's really, really interesting because like you think about, like I think about when I was a kid, right? Like it was like, hey, come home when the street light's on, right? Like, hey, the amount of things that you can do with a river and sticks creatively to like entertain yourself, but like toys would break. We'd have to fix them. Like there was no Google, there was no internet, right? And it's this thing where it's like, it's your business. It's your vision. Nobody else can build it. And I watch people get addicted to consuming content and then people get upset that they don't have the business they want. And I'm like, that's because you built it for everybody else. You've just been doing everything that they tell you, following it verbatim. I try to tell people all the time, like, you can't ever be me and you should never try. You should never try to copy me. You should never try to do what I do. You should try to copy the context, but the content is all you. And like what I tell people when it comes to business, when it comes to relationships, when it comes to customer journey, context is the reason that it works. Like communication and integrity and honesty, right? Like all those principles exist, just like in business, like acquiring customers, converting those customers and retaining those customers. Like that's science. The art of how you do it has to be yours. Because if it doesn't match your personality, if it doesn't match your vibe, if it doesn't align with the things that you believe in, you're going to end up resenting it. And then you end up with that business that you hate, that you don't want to go into. And then you're like, why do I hate it? I'm like, because it's not yours. It's everybody else's. Because here's the truth. And I say this to people all the time. If you're consuming my content, you're building my vision, not yours. I don't want you to consume my content. I want you to consume it until you get a moment of inspiration or a nugget and then turn it the fuck off and then take that thing and then go make it look your way in your business.
Sure.
And then when it works, come back and get like another bite or another inspiration or like another tool. But I think people are just it's almost like conditioned now because of the internet, and COVID like sped this up because the consumption went through the roof. It's just this constant barrage of every 3 seconds being told and reminded that something else doesn't work in your life and that your solution is right there. And it's just like this constant washing machine. But what it is, it's like creating this like whirlpool of stagnation, because the only way to change it anyways is to get off of it and to go take an action, right? It's to go try something. It's to go close Instagram, build something in your business, go to the gym, go change a habit, go change a ritual, go read a book, go process an emotion, go do it all. But nobody does. And it just, that cycle continues. And nobody can tell you how to build your business or how to have that conversation with your employer, how to solve that one problem.
I don't know, man. You gave me some amazing tidbits that I think about for what was it, for a season, for a reason, and for a lifetime with employees. And then more importantly, like understanding and protecting your brand. I mean, you paid me a nice compliment in that, building a brand takes time. It takes consistency. It takes ethos. It takes all these things, and you can't just do it overnight. No. So to have a consistent brand message where its integrity in this is really what people are shooting for.
Huge.
But very few people take the time to build that brand.
Well, and then this goes, and to close the loop that I opened on like the hustle culture, right? The reason is that because they're regurgitating what they're consuming rather than asking, who do I want to be? right? Like I walk into, I've literally seen under the hood of what it feels like hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs' business at this point after like 15 years of doing this. And they all share the same thing in common. Like they had some level of success and then now they have it and they have this space or time or this freedom that they said they wanted and they don't know what to do with it, right? They hustled their way here, but what they don't realize is they built somebody else's vision and they don't want to live in it anymore. And so the amount of people that I help realize like, no, it's not throw the baby out, but we need to make this yours. Like this is your home. This is your recipe. This is your life. And I just watch all too often people like advocate their own responsibility in their vision. Like people, the amount of people that come to like, well, how would I build my vision? I'm like, I can't answer that question for you.
Yeah.
That's like asking me like how to go home and date your wife or like how to tuck your baby in it, babe. Yeah. Like I don't know that
It's your
answer.
business. You tell me, right?
It's your business. You tell me. Now here are the things that are important. And I think the reason I say this is I think it's just become conditioned that everybody hears this stuff, consumes this stuff, and they're like, oh, I'm going to think this way.
The one thing which, if you were to ask me to write one sentence about the lighthouse that I went to for your event.
Oh yeah, my event, yeah.
Which if you guys, if you've listened to this podcast to any length, you know that like I don't go to stuff like this very often. And I was super excited that you invited me as your friend to come. My fucking hair was blown away. Like I was set on fire. It was probably one of the best things I've been to. So you guys have an opportunity to go to George's Lighthouse, fucking go.
Yeah.
The amazing thing is you spent the first day dissecting and giving people permission to be successful. I never thought about that. And maybe because, an NFL player, I was always better to ask for forgiveness and permission. And I was constantly trying to kick the door off the hinges off of everything.
Yep.
But it was amazing to sit there and realize that most people's roadblock is them and their own ego and their own doubt and their own, missteps. And, am I good enough? Am I the right person for this?
Yep.
And these are their businesses. These are entrepreneurs creating their dreams. And they don't think that they're worthy of their own dream.
Yeah.
And your entire day one, that 8 hours was convincing them that you have the right, that I'm giving you permission to be successful and for you to get out of your own way. I still get goosebumps, and I wrote it down, and I don't mean to condense one day into just one sentence, but it was amazing. And like the tools in which you did it, and like taking these people and seeing the emotion, and it was like a fucking roller coaster. But every person there left with like this like empowered feeling on day two. When they walked in, they stood a little brighter, they were friendlier. They wanted to shake hands. Everybody was excited about their business. It was almost as if you removed that barrier and like peeled away all the crap and just kind of pushed these people into like this vulnerable like mindset of learning and wanting to engage in this. And it was a smart, it was super smart and very heady and super rad to see. But yet I've never had to ask anybody for permission. So I saw it happening, and I saw these people just like this metamorphosis take place. And I almost wanted to ask people, I'm like, this is crazy to me. And I'm kind of speechless about it.
Yeah. Well, and it's something you do too. Like I watch you do this with your athletes, right? I'm watching you do this right now. Right. And, I recommended a book to you yesterday, the Catalyst by Jonah Berger, but for me, I think by default, the life how I choose to describe my life, right? The life that I chose to live, like my childhood, the things that I experienced kind of forced my hand a little bit, right? Like I didn't really have an out. I didn't have another way. I kind of had to like bite it down, and the universe or the situations kind of forced this permission slip to where it was like, okay, you either do this or you die, right? But then it became this point where I spent most of my life living in poverty and scarcity, right? It was one to another.
Where do, like on the origin story side, like where'd you grow up? Like, I know you went to the Marines, but give us a little bit of
so I grew up in Massachusetts. So I ended up in a little suburb called Foxborough. So I grew up around all the Pats. And Mosey was my coach, and Lofa and Matt and Tim Hasselbeck. I went to school with them, played street hockey with them.
Yeah, I know Tim. Yeah, I know the Hasselbecks well.
Yeah, and then Lofa used to shove me in lockers, and then we made up and became friends. But yeah, it was a small world community, right? So I grew up there, but it was interesting. I lived in a yuppie Yuppieville, but I had 2 welfare checks a day from the cops, social services caseworker, and was basically homeless from like 13 on to drug abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. And so it was a blessing. I mean, it's interesting to look back now with the work I've done of being a father and knowing what they came from. I would give my parents A's for getting me through, or even to that point, for me to be the one to break the generational patterns. But like now what I know, I see it very differently, but it was rough. Right. So I was bullied a ton when I was in West Hartford, Connecticut until 5th grade. I was the only white kid in my class. So my front teeth were knocked out 3 times by like 5th grade. And then nose was broken twice in high school. I was bullied because I was the one with the druggy parents and the one with the cops and that was homeless, right? So I basically worked 3 jobs and scraped my way by. My teachers passed me out of spite, and not spite meaning like they gave me a chance. And I still talk to them to this day, by the way. Most of them listen to my podcast. I've coached them in business. Like I'm still friends with them because they're the reason I'm here. And I don't know what they knew, but I knew at an early age. I just didn't want to end up like that. I didn't know where to go, and I just thought I was going to die if I stayed there. And so I tried to just leave. And so the only thing I'd sought a Marine recruiter at my high school. And I was like, I'll do that. So I drove to the recruiter's office. I tried to join. They told me I was too fat. You know, I was bulimic at the time, so that didn't help, but I lost the weight pretty quick. And I ended up forging my parents' signature and depping into the Marine Corps at 17. And so the moment I graduated, I was out and I took off. It was like July 29th of 2002, I went to boot camp. And then, so then that started a 13-year active duty career. I'll speed through that one pretty quickly.
You went on active duty, you fought overseas.
Yep. So I'll go through it. So I went in July 29th, 2002. Like I said, there was this thing, and I don't talk about this often. But it's weird to think about, because even as a kid, right? Like I saw the abuse, like I stood up for my brother. But it was weird because I always I don't want to live like this. Like I had this awareness as a kid, like this isn't for me. I never drank. I didn't do drugs, and I had access to all of them, right? Like I just had this thing in me where like I wanted to be different. Don't know what it was. Don't know where it came from. And it's interesting because people reflect to me that like, oh, I'm a savage and like I do this. And I'm like, God, I feel like I cheated my way through CrossFit. I was the one that was cut in reps, but still in the competitions, I obviously didn't cut reps, right? Sure. I still won. But like in my own training, I'm like over there like, you idiot, you lack of integrity, fuck, how dare you count that as a rep, right? Like there's just this weird inner dialogue, right? And so I didn't know any better. And I went to boot camp. I was not in shape. Like I checked into Marine boot camp. I could do 5 pull-ups. I could run 3 miles in like 26 minutes, and I could do like 68 of the crunches. And to basically be an honor graduate at boot camp, you have to have a 300 PFT, and like you have to be the shit. Somehow I show up as this like kind of chunky fat kid. And on day 7, I end up the guide. And I'm like the one kid who keeps it the whole time. And I end up as the honor graduate of the entire 1,300 people. And I was like the first one in like 7 years that didn't have a perfect PFT. No idea why I was picked. No idea why they chose me. And I ended up, making improvements. I got like a 286, but like it was unheard of. And so I got meritoriously promoted. And then I went to Marine combat training, and I graduated first out of 700 people. And then I went to my job station, my school, and I graduated first. So I got to pick my duty station. And so then I showed up, and they're like, who wants to get deployed? I'm like, me. And then 13 months in Somalia. But that's when I almost lost both my legs in December 27th, 2004. I had exercise-induced compartment syndrome bilaterally on a mission.
Well, I saw the scars on your shins, and I was going to ask you about compartment syndrome. Yeah.
So the weirdest part, bilateral exercise-induced simultaneously. Yeah.
What was the mechanism? What happened?
I was running to a helo on a mission, and I was probably 220 of like muscle, probably had 80 pounds of gear on. It was 120 degrees, 97% humidity, and we were running. It just felt like shin splints on steroids, but stopping wasn't an option. And so I just kept running, and then I was unconscious.
Wow. And
then I woke up in the back of a helo, and then that's when that happened. So that ended up getting me medevaced, went back, and then when I came back, they actually flew me back, and then did my post-op medical like 6 hours later, and I was on an operating table in like an hour.
Wow.
I had clots everywhere, and they flew me back from Africa because I was in Somalia.
Where were you? Where'd they fly you to?
They flew me all the way back to North Carolina.
Oh, Jesus.
And so then they're like, wow, this is bad. So they did a temporary release, and then I did a recovery, and they're like, nope, we're going to have to amputate your legs. And I was like, They're like, you're never going to make a recovery. This is bad. And I was like, this was 2005. So I'd only been gone for 3 years. I had nothing to go back to. Like, there was nothing. And I was like, no, I fought so hard to get a second opinion, and I got a civilian recommendation because I convinced them that the first surgery didn't work and I needed a second opinion. And that guy saved me, but he looked me dead in the eye and he's like, they're right. And he's like, I can fix this temporarily. He's like, you got a good 6 years and then you're out. He's like, this is not, you shouldn't go back on full duty. I'm like, I know, I just want to be able to use my legs. Yeah. Sew me up, doc. So it was hell. That was probably one of the darkest times of my life because I had to do each fasciotomy separately and then have it debrided. And then I got addicted to opiates because I had a PCA pump. Then I gained 100 pounds. So I'm 5'7". I was 267 in a wheelchair, bulimic, addicted to opiates, going through all of this. So that's when I attempted my life.
At what age? Like 25?
I was, yeah. So yeah, this was 2005, 2006. So yeah, 23.
23. Wow.
Yeah, because I was living in a barracks room alone for 6 months. I didn't have anybody. And so it was just me in a wheelchair, in my injuries, in my pain, with my opiates and my 2 large pepperoni pizzas, full bottle of ranch and full bottle of Frank's. And I'd purge it up. And that was the pattern. And then I overdosed one night. I took like 75, 10, 325 hydrocodones and drank an entire bottle of Crown and was like, I'm out. And then I woke up some ungodly amount of hours later and didn't even think I was alive. It was weird because I didn't understand, and I was completely fine. And it kind of changed everything for me. Nothing got better. But then the reality hit me, and then they looked at me and they're like, you have 6 months to get better or you're out. And luckily, the benefit of being a Marine is that physical therapy wasn't an option. It was an 8-hour-a-day requirement.
Yeah.
And so my little physical therapist was this 4'11" mean Asian woman that fucking hated me. And I needed that. And so she made me show up every day and taught me how to walk again. And I don't have feeling from the knee down. So I had to relearn like proprioception of everything. So I was like, oh yeah, I was a really good snowboarder. It's not like riding a bike because you lose all feeling. All the neural pathways are gone, everything. So basically she worked with me and then signed me up for a triathlon. And that's what got me kind of addicted to fitness again. And I won my first triathlon after not having feeling in my legs. And then I got bit by that. And then fitness became my new addiction. So that kept me in. I ended up going back on full duty, did an Ironman, then ended up in Afghanistan. And then ended up having 7 traumatic brain injuries over the years, right? So I had bleeding in my brain, fluid in my brain, injuries in combat, things like that. And then started CrossFit in Afghanistan. And that's when I found paleo and Rob, and Rob's book. And then that's when I actually started to feel better. I just lost my dad to cancer before Afghanistan. I just lost a couple Marines. Like I was in a pretty dark place. And I was like, I gotta do something different. And so I started CrossFitting, and I naturally started eating paleo, and all of a sudden my hormones felt better. I wasn't purging anymore. I figured out I had celiac disease, and you stack that on top of eating disorders and body image issues. It's kind of a nasty recipe.
Sure.
And so when I found Rob's book, I read it and I'm like, oh, that makes sense. And I started doing it, and all of a sudden I got shredded, which was just a byproduct. And I was like, this is effortless. I'm eating clean. I'm not having cravings. I realized I stopped being bulimic, and I was actively bulimic in Afghanistan. That's how I dealt with the stress. And I was sleeping better, and I just started to feel good. And I was like, God, I want to feel better. And so I was like, when I get home, I'm going to teach myself how to cook, and I'm going to beat my bulimia, but I didn't want to tell anybody.
Yeah.
I was like, I'd spent my whole life alone, right? And so, yeah, I read it fucking, and of course I know how good you and Rob are friends. And
Yeah,
I've known him now for, since then.
We know your health and wellness are a priority. That's why we partnered with Stay Classy Meats. They are dedicated to connecting you with the finest, responsibly raised meats on the planet. Their direct partnerships with farmers and ranchers mean they can deliver to you nationwide. They're more than a meat company. They're a network of athletes and farmers committed to superior nutrition. Stay Classy works with producers like R.C. Carter, whose regenerative agricultural practices result in beef that's packed with 75% more essential amino acids, phytonutrients, and a perfect blend of omega-3/6 ratio. Experience a difference with their 10-pound ground beef or 15-pound assorted meat subscription box, specially branded as the Stay Classy Power Athlete box. Click on the link and order today with the promo code POWERATHLETE, all one word. Join us in securing your health and food supply chain. Stay Classy meats superior nutrition naturally. It's time to step up your game. Stay classy with us. When I saw Rob the other day, my comment to him, and we were just on a podcast, is the amount of good that you've done in the world has bought you so much good karma and so much cachet that like whatever happens in your life, dude, there's an army of people ready to kick the doors out the hinge.
And I told him this because, Rob and I are friends. Like we're actually neighbors now.
Yeah.
Funny how we always bumped into each other throughout the years. And then one day I'm at the gym and I hear my name and I turn around. I'm like, Rob? He's like, what are you doing in Big Fork? I'm like, I live here. What are you doing here? And he's like, I live here. Yeah. But yeah, full circle. But yeah. And so it was really interesting because I was just used to doing everything alone my life and surviving. I'd still never dealt with any of my childhood, still never dealt with any of the death. I just took all that fuel and I applied it. So I became a black belt martial arts instructor. I tied a world record for a standing box jump. I was like, I turned fitness into my thing. And then I came home and I was like, all right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to cook a recipe a day. I'm going to teach myself how to cook, but I need accountability. So I'm just going to post it on Facebook. Well, I couldn't get a Facebook account because I didn't go to college. So I had to make a fake college email server, make a fake college email and sign up for a Facebook account in like 2009, 2010. And then I literally would cook a recipe and I'd post it on a Facebook page. And I just did that every single day. And over time, I just started feeling better. I was really competitive in CrossFit. I was doing competitions. And then after like 6 months, someone's like, you should start a blog. I'm like, what the fuck is a blog? And so I go to blogger.com and I needed a name. So I came up with the best business name in the world, Civilized Caveman Cooking Creations.blogspot.com.
It's a hell of a mouthful.
Yeah. So I didn't start as a good business marketer, right? I learned as time went on.
Dude, what's so ironic is when you mentioned Civilized Caveman, I used to see your blog and I used to see the recipes. And like there was this paleo cornbread one that we had tried to make. And there was paleo pizza. And
and my cookbook did pretty good. Yeah. So basically, I was still a Marine. I just got back from Afghanistan and I was dealing with the fallout of the TBI, and the TBI was bad. The bleeding on my brain was bad. I was passing out. The pain management, I'd be in a dark corner for 2 days. I couldn't get up. I was puking. Like it was horrendous. I went through nerve blocks. We basically spent a year and a half with everything you can imagine. And then they were like, okay, you're done. And the only thing that helped me was I was eating so clean. And the more I was eating paleo, the more I was getting introduced into like alternative health. And I happened to be living in like the biggest cesspool of shit. PTSD, the pain. I'm taking like 20 opiates a day right now. Like I just couldn't even function. And so they're like, hey, we're going to medically separate you. And I was like, oh, and that means like no retirement. That means like I'm just out. Like, hey, it's been a fun 13 years. We're out. And I was like, oh shit. And so I didn't really know what to do. And then it just so happened that one day someone's like, hey, all these recipes on your website are great. Could you put them in an ebook for me? Like it would be easier. So I spent all weekend making a Google Doc and I emailed it to him. And he's like, no, I wanted to pay you. You should like upload it to this website called ClickBank. So this guy was like an internet marketer, kind of told me what to do, but I didn't know any better. So when I started the blog, I was like, well, if I'm going to post a recipe, if anybody comments, I'm going to respond because if they're reading it. So I had this rule that every day I would respond to every comment. I'd post every day. So I ended up posting for like 11 months straight and responding to every comment. And so there were maybe like 1,000 people that read my blog. And so then I do what this guy says and I put up on the website, I do a blog post, and I'll never forget the first day I made like 47 grand. Wow. Second day I made like 86 grand. And then I'm still a Marine. And then I was like, fuck this, I'm out. Yeah. And then I just stopped going to work. I didn't care at this point. I knew my med board was in, and then they ended up discharging me about, like 2.5 months later. And I made $1 million with my first ever digital product. And everyone's like, well, why? And I was like, oh, same thing I teach now. I showed up and helped people every day for 12 months and I listened to what they wanted. And then the moment they asked, I made it. I asked them what they pay for it. They all agreed. And then they all shared it for me.
It's almost like it works.
Yeah. It's the same thing I still do now, 15 years later. And then that blog, like I never cooked before. I taught myself on the internet. I watched and learned, and then I documented my journey of learning how to cook while healing my body. I was open about my bulimia. I was open about my sexual abuse. I told them that I lied to them. I was a New York Times best-selling book author, and on tours when I came clean that I was still bulimic. Like, I tried to commit career suicide by living in integrity and healing my journey. And everything I've ever done has just been me wearing every ounce of myself on a sleeve and being willing to share all of it with everybody, the shadows, the insides, the outsides, and then helping irregardless of how I feel. So that blog, I never spent $1 on it. 2 years after learning how to cook, I was a 22-week New York Times bestseller when someone said I'd never be a New York Times bestseller. And then someone's like, well, you couldn't make an app. Well, the year later, I was Apple's #1 health app of 2015.
Wow.
Right? Like, I was a 22-week New York Times bestseller with 6,000 people on my email list and like 7,000 social media followers. Oh, because the 9 months before my book came out, I gave a recipe for free away a day and gave free cooking classes and helped people and told them about my book every day. Yeah. So that when the book dropped, there were 7,000 people waiting to buy it. And then they all started sharing it. And then, you know, it's like magic. It's like the easy button, the work that you do when nobody's looking to add value to people's lives. And so I ended up becoming one of the top paleo food bloggers after reading Rob's book and doing it. And then was getting like 6 million people a month on my website. We had, my paleo banana bread was repinned like 7 billion times.
Yeah, on Pinterest.
Yeah, so the Pinterest founders called me after my wedding and flew my wife and I up to San Francisco because they couldn't understand how I was doing it.
Because it was really good.
It was, yeah, and I also taught them how to use their platform better. And I was like, well, no, you guys just don't understand. People are trying to get followers. It's just how many pins come from your website. And they're like, how do you know that? I'm like, just pay attention, people. Just pay attention. And so I did that. And then, you know, I realized I things got dark. I didn't get better, right? Like, and now at this point I'm married. The PTSD has taken over. I'd lost 3 more Marines to suicide. And my PTSD was never about combat. It wasn't about that. It's the fact that like I brought all my Marines. Like I was a calm Marine. I ended up on some QRFs and stuff. No, nothing near like my friends. But every one of my Marines went out there with me and came home, and I've lost 28 of them to suicide. Wow. That's what eats me. And I witnessed 3 of them.
Why, I mean, is it the hopelessness? Is like the lack, like I had purpose and now I have none, or there's almost like I can
tell you what it was like for me.
I've always said that if you're going to send people to war, when you bring them home, you have to take care of your broken toys.
Yeah,
you can't just send them off to the island of misfit toys.
1,000%. And I can only speak for me, because I lived with it for my own experience. I was trying to explain to somebody the other day, and the only way I can explain it is telling like what it felt like. Like when I turned 21 years old in Somalia, right? So I was there from May of 04 to May of 05. And when you're a 20-year-old kid, grew up like I grew up, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to war, right? You go to somewhere like Somalia and spend 13 months of your life, you are met with what the darkness of humanity really, really is. And no one's ready for that. Nobody's ready for that. But the craziest part is that I spent 13 months of my life living there, and all I had to worry about was eating, sleeping, training, doing my job, right? And it's like you're in a fucking time capsule or a coma, because you come home and you're like so excited to see everybody, but you realize that nobody even realized you were gone and life went on. People that weren't married are married. People that didn't have kids have kids. Your entire life progressed a year without you being there. And you haven't had to worry about an ounce of it. No traffic, no car insurance, no bills, no people, no nothing. Like your entire function was Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the base level for 13 months of your life. It feels like you have an out of body experience and that you feel like you're living in the Matrix, because you cannot collapse that dissonance with anything but time. And it is the weirdest thing. Because you literally, for me, it felt like I had an identity crisis every day. I didn't understand. Like, I'm like, oh yeah. Oh wait, where was I? Why? And like, you feel so unseen and so out of it. Like you don't, and I remember you could go read through 20 years of therapy notes. I feel like an alien. I feel like I don't belong. I feel like people don't see me. I feel like I'm living in a different world than everybody else. They don't see the things that I see. They don't feel the things that I feel. It was fucking weird. That's how it felt for me. And then it was like disassociative. And then like when I would have my nightmares at night, I would wake up and be spatially disoriented. I would be in situations where people were dying in front of me and I couldn't control it, right? Like I couldn't touch it. I couldn't stop it. I couldn't do it. And that's what it felt like for me. And so I don't know, but I will say this, you spend 13 years investing millions and millions of dollars into somebody like me to turn me into, whatever I am, right? And then on the way out the door, I'm mandated to sit through 16 hours of PowerPoints and then said, good luck. That's it. That's how it goes, right? That's it. And yes, the VA is there. And here's my thing about the VA. The people that work in the VA have to be some of the most incredible, selfless human beings that I've ever met, to be able to even work in an organization that ties your hands, and then you be a punching bag because you're the only people that people see. Mm-hmm. But to work in that place, like you gotta really care about people, because it's horrible. But like standard of care that you just can't, right? Like there's not enough support to support what's happening. Like the things that are coming up, like there was not, there's been war, there's been a lot of stuff documented for years in history and things, but like the things that have seen and been done and the things that are happening to people, like it's so new, the increased amount of injuries and brain and all of that, like it's not going to change from the top down. Like it has to be like eradicated, but sure. It's not this like, here's this linear approach. Like it is so holistic, and it has to be so multifaceted and so attacked on many facets that you can't. Like if I was to call the VA right now and I'm like, hey, I need a doc again, I need to go see a mental doc, it could be potentially 6 to 9 months before I get my first appointment. And like I remember those days, like because I remember when I was having suicidal thoughts again right before my son was born. And I looked at Lindsay, it was Thanksgiving Day, and I was like, I need help. And she's like, great, call the hospital. And I called the hospital, and they're like, yep, the earliest appointment is 6 months. And I lost it. And they were like, no, go to your vet center. They'll give you some meds, which side effects, by the way, are suicidal ideations, and depression.
Yeah.
And then I broke down. I lost it on the phone. And the woman's like, and I was like, no, here's the thing. Like, I don't want to take my life, but I feel like taking my life. So no, I don't want to tell you that I'm going to take it. Like, I don't want to say that. Right. And she's like, listen to me. I need you and your wife to drive here right now, and I need you to say this exact statement. And once you say it, you don't have to say it again, but it's going to get you admitted to the hospital. They're going to discharge you in 48 hours, and you're guaranteed, because you legally have to have an appointment within 7 days. And she's like, that is the only way that I can guarantee you get an appointment. So we drove up to the hospital. I walked into the ER, and I was like, I'm afraid I'm going to take my life. And they're like, you are? I'm like, yes, I am. I'm like, okay, we'll admit you. And then I walked upstairs and I sat down with the charge doctor, and I was like, I don't belong here. I need an appointment and I need help. And they're like, well, you're going to have to spend the whole weekend till our doc gets here. I'm like, totally fine. On Monday, right? So this is like Friday night. By Saturday morning, I was ready to kill somebody, John. I was like, I can't be in here. Like, I'm watching people not get treatment, not get things. I'm like, can recite their DSM manual to them. And so I was like, I need to talk to the doctor. And I walked in, I like basically gave him a chart of every one of his patients, because I went and talked to all of them. And I was like, hey, this is what they're doing. I'm not here to play a game. I just need an appointment. I need you to let me go. And they had to like call up, and they literally let me go. And they let me walk out. My wife picked me up, and then I had an appointment like 7 days later. And then I was excited. So I got my first doc. I had 4 appointments in a row. Take those first 4 appointments for him to know the whole story. I show up to my 5th appointment. He was let go. I had another doc. That happened 4 times in the first 6 months. And then I just had to stop going.
Oh my God. The turnover's that high, huh?
That high. And so every time it was like, I have to do this again. I have to do this again. And then that's when I started going outside, and I started doing EMDR on the side and things like that. And so, yeah, it's just there's not an easy solution. The first part is like really just understanding that like it changes you, right? It changes you on a level, and it's not easy to integrate. Like, it doesn't go away. Like, the hypervigilance doesn't go away. You just have a relationship with it. Mm-hmm. Right. And there's not many things out there. And I'm telling you, medication's not the answer. Right?
No, it's not.
It's behaviors. It's reintegration. And I don't know. I think about this all the time. I have friends that own nonprofits that do this work, and like a lot of them. And these are things that keep me up at night. And I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I know for me personally, it's always nice to just feel seen and accepted, irregardless of like the story or the thing. Like, the people in my life that had the biggest impact on me, they didn't care that I was a Marine or not a Marine. They didn't care that like what I saw or didn't see. They just were like, hey, I'm here, right? Like, if you need anything, like, I'm here. Like, it's completely fine, right? And it's just like no one's going to understand unless they're there with you. Like, we don't want anybody to understand. Like, I'll never understand what it's like to stand on a football field with a team in the middle of the shit. I would never even try. But if you're like, hey, like, I'm just having a bad fucking day, I'm like, I get it, man. If you need anything, I'm here, right? Yeah. It's just knowing that somebody's there, right? Like, because it's not going to go away, right? Like, it's not going to get out of my body. No one's going to eradicate it. You're not going to come in with a garden hoe and just take the trauma out or those things away, right? It's just, I want to know that in those moments that, like, I feel safe to be around people I love.
Well, being a Marine in the military, you're surrounded by all these people. You have this family, you have this identity. We're all wearing the same uniform. We're here on the mission. So there's this kind of general collective idea. Same with playing football. Mm-hmm. You show up every day, you go to a locker room, there's a game plan, there's a mission. We're going to go on here and this is all, and you have your friends. And then one day they just go, fuck off.
Out. Yep.
And I had an interesting kind of moment of this. I played with Kyle Turley.
Okay.
Kyle was like top 6 pick overall, cover Sports Illustrated. He's in his last year, and I was playing guard. He was playing tackle. We brought him in, and he ends up he had a back injury. His foot went numb. Couldn't feel his foot. Goes into the trainers, and it's like, I can't feel my foot. Takes like a sharp set of scissors and literally stabs himself. And it's like, I can't feel this. And they're like, holy shit. So they're trying to like get him to play. Can't. And they're like, hey, you know what? We're just going to put you on injured reserve. Bring somebody else out. So this is like maybe 2 or 3 games left in the year. And so he comes in, I see him. I'm like, hey, what'd the doctor say? He's like, oh, they just basically just put me on IR. I'm done. I was like, oh, shit. And he's like cleaning out his locker. He's like, I'm going to go home. I'm going to go back to Tennessee. So he's like, picks up his box. And I'm like, you want me to walk you out? He's like, yeah. So like we walk out to the parking lot by ourselves, right? Help him load his shit in the car. And I see like it starts snowing. And the dude gets in his car and like drives away, and I'm like waving goodbye. I'm like, this guy was like the master of ceremonies for the Endymion Parade. He was on the cover of Sports Illustrated, number 6 overall, and this like, all the parades and everything. And like, here's the end of his career. And like, there's not a single person there, and he's driving away with like one friend waving as it starts snowing. And I'm like, this is probably the most depressing thing I've ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like we were talking about earlier, the analogy of getting sent off to the island of misfit toys is like the same thing.
Yes.
And, all of a sudden, the NFL changed when dudes started killing themselves, started shooting themselves in the chest and like, look at my brain.
Yeah.
And, it was this huge thing, but it's this massive moneymaker. It's this media campaign. It's professional football.
Yeah.
But the military, they're still going through this.
Yeah. And I think too, but I play my own devil's advocate on this, right? Because I'm not a victim. Like, let me just be clear right now. Nobody signed my name. I did.
Yeah, we all made a voluntary choice.
We all made a choice, right? And I think it's really, really easy, and I can have this conversation with you of all people, right? Like, the amount of reflection that I've thought on these topics and these things, but it's so easy to put into like, oh, the victim. And I think first off, and I will say this as a vet, that is the easiest way to make it hard on us is to see us like that, right? Because that was actually part of the problem. Is that I allowed my identity to be wrapped up in that. And then everybody else victimized me in that identity. And I believed that I couldn't fix my life. I couldn't heal my life. And I attempted to take it. Well, here I am at 40 years old in the best shape of my fucking life. I haven't taken a pain pill or a drug in 5 years, right? I do breath work, cold therapy, red light therapy. Like, I'm in the best shape of my life at 40. But yet I still don't have feeling in my legs. I still have those same brain injuries, right? And it's like, that's because people held me to like, there are other ways. You went in this, you could figure this out. So I think that that's a big part of it. But I also want to say that like, I also have to give credence to like the tool that it is. Like, I don't have any suspicions that when I joined the military that I'm some prized possession. Like, I'm this paid athlete. Like, I'm a tool. I'm a pawn on a board. I just happen to be a good one that didn't want to be dispensable and didn't allow myself to believe that I was truly a pawn. Mm-hmm. I looked at myself and was able to find myself as a tool that happened to use that uniform for a while. And that's a big part of this, because the identity piece, and I think this is a big part, you talk about this all the time when we coach people. And I think for me, I think the mindset piece of entrepreneurship, and even what we've talked about today, like the hustle culture, the boom, and I think you got to be really, really careful about what you claim to identify as, and what you claim to be your labels and how you speak about yourself, because it's going to dictate who you surround yourself with. And like, for me, like what matters in my life is my real relationship with you, not this podcast, not this business, not anything. Like, it's the hugs that we shared. It's like finding my big brother, like the moments, like when you're stressed and your wife's like, call George. Like those are the things that fucking light me up, right? Like that's what matters to me. But the only really way to get there is to realize that we're not entrepreneurs. We're not football players. We're not the guy that was a Marine. We're just cool ass people that are choosing to do things together. And I think that's the secret to entrepreneurship, right? Because you really don't want to be around people that tell you they have your answers. You want to be around people that tell you that you already have the answer. Yeah. And that's the biggest part, is that if you consistently think about, like, even the story of my Marine Corps, like in my life and most of the struggles I had were always because I identified as the thing I was doing. And you and I both know this is great. The ones that are world champions identify as world champion, but they don't care about the belt. They live, eat, and breathe that every single day. And the moment they think they've made it, they lose it. Yeah. Right? It's game over. Yep. Right? And so it's this thing of like, when you really, really get down to it, whether you think of yourself as an athlete, whether you think yourself as an entrepreneur, no matter what, every day is a matter of like what bricks you lay. And if you're laying them for your future or you're laying them in reaction to your past, because that's at the end of the day, that's it. Like when you get down to business, when you get down to success, I say this to my clients all the time. And this is a part of getting the permission slip out. No one's coming to do this for you. Right? And if you tell me you want to run a marathon in a year, eventually you're going to have to put boots to pavement and you're going to have to put the reps in. And I will tell you right now that the faster you just start running on the pavement, the faster you're going to be able to finish a marathon, rather than watching videos for 6 months, getting your strides studied. Like, you just got to start putting the reps in. But it's never going to be anybody else's answers. Like, nobody's coming to give them to you. Nobody's coming to have the funnel that works. No one's going to come convert the clients with an easy way. No one's model is going to work for you because it's not yours. It's going to have to be you. But there's a level of integrity that comes with that, because you have to be able to look at yourself, and this takes work, like you're an athlete, not like you're a failure because you missed a pass or didn't get the block, right? And this thing with entrepreneurs, and I say this all the time, I was addicted to this as well. I would get a flat tire, right? I'd throw a pass and I'd miss. And then instead of changing it, I would slash the other 3 and walk off the field. But like, fuck it, I'm not throwing another pass today. And I'm like, it's second down. What are you doing? Yeah. Just run it again, right? And it's because I was getting all wrapped up in personally, like, oh, I'm a failure because that didn't work, or that didn't work, or that didn't work. And that's from all that overconsumption and believing all this bullshit that's out there. Right? You want to know if you have a business, throw your phone in the trash for 7 days. I'll tell you if you have a business or not. Because if you don't know where to go or what to do, or if you're making money or not making money, you don't have one. You have an addiction, right? It's like all this stuff that's there. Like, you shouldn't need to be on your phone to like run your life or be consuming content. Like, those are distractions. Your business is the functions that exist inside of it. And you need to focus on those. And so I say this because, like, the hustle thing earlier, no, if you have 20 hours a day to give it, but make sure you're giving it to something that's integrous and intentional about where you want to be in the future, not in reaction to where you were or because somebody else said it, right? The thing that I have with hustle is the fact that everybody's convinced that they're doing it to have more time, money, and freedom, but that's the thing that they're sacrificing.
This episode of Power Athlete Radio is powered by Train Heroic, the most immersive strength training app experience on the market.
We've built our online training business by partnering with Train Heroic and helping us deliver all of our world-class training programs like Jack Street, Field Strong, and Grindstone. To learn which Power Athlete training program best suits your goals, head to powerathletehq.com/training.
And if you're a coach looking to build a business with the best tech and training, go to trainheroic.co/powerathletehq. And now back to the show.
Well, the age old, like we have smartphones and we have all this and everybody's so busy and, you know, they're doing it to try to be more efficient, but nobody has any time to do anything.
Yeah. And the reason I say this, and you, God, your stuff. And just for everybody listening to this, like, listening to John after my event was one of the most humbling things ever. And here's the thing on the permission slip, and I wanted to close this loop from earlier. The universe forced me to kind of write my own. But then I realized that at every single point in my career where I've had some big catalytic moment that led to a failure or a success, if I reflect on every single one of those moments, The ones that won was when I chose to trust myself and write my permission slip to take that action. And the ones that lost are when I waited for somebody else to tell me to go. Right? Like that's it. And to think, and you know this better than anybody, you can't win without a team. You can't. There is no solo success in which way you slice it. To be one of the greats, to even be in the top 10%, which by the way, if you make over like $450,000 a year as an entrepreneur, you're like in the top 3% of all entrepreneurs, just for the record.
Wow.
And so you need a team, right? And you need people that can kind of see you. And so, but you also have to understand that when you're an athlete, like when you're a Tom Brady, for lack of better terms, you can't be Tom Brady and Bill Belichick at the same time. Yeah. Right. But in entrepreneurship, sometimes you have to, but you have to be able to identify kind of what role that you get into. It gets really, really easy to get stuck. A permission slip is just a perspective shift. That's all it is, right? Like really all I'm doing is I'm forcing people to pull their ripcords to 30,000 feet and pause for a moment, right? That's all I'm doing, right? So if you read The Gap and the Gain, I'm creating a wedge, right? There's also an incredible book called The Wedge from Scott Carney. And I'm not joking. This is an entire book on one response system of your nervous system. Like It's an entire book on training your autonomic nervous system to withstand resistance, so be able to respond instead of react, right? But what I'm really, really doing is I'm forcing a perspective shift that gets you out of your own pill bottle to see it from the outside in. And the moment that happens, the cloudiness gets clear because you're looking from the outside in. And that perspective shift is you get to see, holy shit, I've come from here. Oh my God, I am doing that. Oh, I am doing that. But you also get to see, oh, that's not working. That's not working. That's not working. And so it's just like this re-grounded memory. And it's almost like for me, like when like you train at your home gym and then you're on the road for 2 weeks and then you get back to your home gym, like that first workout, you're like, God, I feel so much clearer and better to be here, right? And so this permission slip thing, I'm going to tell everybody that if you win, like when you want to win as an entrepreneur, you want to win as a human, your job should be obsessed with becoming the triage nurse as many times as possible in as many moments as possible in your life. The more presence that you have, the more awareness you have of the field in front of you to choose a behavior to kind of respond to. Permission slips for me are just simple perspective shifts that allow me to see what's in front of me. And then I can measure that against where I want to go versus where I came from. And this is why I wanted to say this, because you're so big on like full integration and knowing your model and like living it on the mental level, the physical level, and the emotional level, and embodying it all the way through. But in order to do that, you have to be able to see it that way, right? And you have to be able to understand that there's a why deeper than just like the behavior that you're doing. But if you fall into the trap, like most entrepreneurs, of that your day is just do, you'll never get it. And it requires some outside force, right? It requires an event or a catalyst or a thing. And the goal for everybody should be to borrow those until they can kind of create their own. But when you think about it, no matter which way you slice it, when you're an entrepreneur, when you're a human, when you're a parent, right, things in our life as we grow and scale just increases the noise around us, and our ability to filter that, find what's underneath it, and then prioritize it is what allows us to win, right? That's the triage nurse concept for me. It's like just finding it as many times as possible. And so for me, the permission slip is just really allowing myself to understand the field that I'm on, like at any given moment. And if there's areas of that field that are out of integrity and I'm pretending they're not there, nothing I work on is going to work, right? And so that's why I'm so obsessed with like this gap or this wedge or this concept, because I realized that I was losing for so long, not because I didn't have a permission slip. It's that I was just continuing to do the same old behaviors expecting a different result because I never stopped to see. I didn't check that workout. I didn't say like, oh, how did I run that play or what did I do? I was like, oh, run it again, run it again, run it again, run it again. And so that's why I'm so obsessed about these like wedges. And so I'm like, no, have a stillness practice, like have an alarm clock on your phone 3 times a day that goes off that says, hey, is what I'm currently doing aligned with my vision, right? Like have these reminders around so that you can check in and have that perspective to see that, right? Like put these tools or these pieces in place, because I think at the end of the day, what we have to understand is that your business, your success, your workout, right? If you're currently sitting at this table, like, okay, here's where I want to be in 6 months. This is my training goal. You can sit at this table all day, But until you get up from this table and walk your happy ass up to the gym and put that first set and rep into place, it's not going to come to fruition.
Sure.
And entrepreneurship is no different, right?
Is entrepreneurship made and break in the planning? Or do you encounter people that are just like these lofty goals, planning, this is the thing I'm going to execute. I've done this and this and this. And you're like,
it's made in the, I feel like entrepreneurship's made in the perspective.
Yeah.
It's not the planning, right? Entrepreneurship as a game is predictable. It's football, it's soccer, it's baseball. If you have a physical product, there's a model. If you have a digital product, there's a model, right? Like you can't, very good luck finding me a business right now that doesn't have an existing model that says, if you do this, convert this and do this, you get here, right? So when we think about it, we all have the same tools, right? We have the Shopifys, the Instagrams, the things like that. The difference between the people who win and lose is the perspective, right? The ones that see the short game and the long game, and the ones who understand what they're doing. Because people come to me all the time right now. They're like, I don't get how that company just launched in a saturated market and they're doing X. And I'm like, I can tell you every single time. There's only 3 things they did. They focused on what mattered. They focused on the needle movers and they obsessed about it religiously until it became a thing, right? It's the perspective, right? Like people right now, they're like, oh my God, I'm so upset that nobody's commenting on my Instagram. And I'm like, okay, that's one perspective. And I was like, how many people liked it? And they're like 780. I'm like, okay, that's 780 people that felt compelled to like it, that didn't feel safe enough to leave a comment. So either ask a better question or I don't have an idea, maybe go comment on their stuff, see what happens then. And they're like, oh, right. There's always different perspectives, right? And people will come to me and they're like, oh my God, George, those 5 YouTube clips only had 1.9 thousand views each. And then the big one, had a lot, but I want the smaller ones. And I was like, those smaller ones are the reason the big one had. And they're like, no, I'm like, great, don't post the smaller ones next week. And they're like, George, my YouTube shows aren't getting views anymore. And so I think perspective is really, really what it boils down to. And I think for most entrepreneurs, they set goals in decades and they measure in days. It's just perspective, right? Yeah. It's like your athlete, like when you get somebody that's a world champion, and I say this to my friends all the time, your gains go from seconds to milliseconds. And the gaps go from weeks to months to years to gain those same milliseconds. And it's really about the perspective and realizing what you're gaining, but also where you came from so that you can keep the consistent behavior until the breakthrough happens. And in entrepreneurship, people struggle because it's really, really boring when you figure it out.
Yeah, it's consistent. It's nauseating. It's it's boring as
right.
fuck.
And Mike Tyson says it the best. He's like, discipline is doing things you fucking hate and doing them like you love doing them. And when you think about business, like, no, I don't like recording X amount all the time or necessarily writing X amount of emails or having all those meetings. Those are my reps and sets to achieve the physique for me to stand on stage or to achieve that thing to win the race. Like they're the reps that put in the work. That's the part that people struggle with because they think it's the glitz and glam. They get addicted to the hustle culture and they think it's, this lifestyle, it's go, go, go. I'm like, yeah, all those dinners you see me post are 4-hour sleepless nights in hotels as it's meeting and flight to flight to flight to be able to maintain that. And I think it's always going to boil down to perspective, right? It always has to be about how you choose to see it because no matter what, everybody that I've seen struggle, and everybody hits this lesson. So the numbers are about predictable. It's like 100 grand, 500 grand, $1 million, 5 million, 10 million, 25, 50. There's like these inflection points within a 10% range where people hit these plateaus. And what typically ends up happening is that somebody will have something and it will start working, right? And they'll like that it's working. So they'll start to scale it and they'll expand it. But in the scaling and expanding it, they won't realize that the things that were working, they got so distracted, they stopped doing them. And so then the fallout though is like a trailing period, right? Because like for certain behaviors, right? Like especially in marketing and in business, sometimes you don't see those results for like 90 days to 120 days, right? And so like, oh, I made my first $500,000. Okay, I'm going to hire this person. I'm going to systemize this. I'm going to do this. And they do all that, but then they don't realize that they stopped these like 3 core behaviors. They're like, oh, well, no, I automated that. I'm like, yeah, but you went from sending a personal video message to everybody who responded on Instagram to sending an automated text message. And then that just happened for the trailing 90 days and you're wondering why your conversions are down. We can't fix this now, We have to refix this for another 180 days because we have to fill the wound back, and then we have to come back to positive, right? So what ends up happening is that people get so excited about what's working, they get excited to scale it, it gets distracting, and they stop those core queen bee roles that Mike McCallum calls them, or Dean Graziosi calls them, needle movers, right? What we call them. And then they wonder why the business doesn't work. And John, I'm not joking, 9 out of 10 times when an entrepreneur comes into my office at the $1 million mark, $3 million, $5 million mark, when I'm through all the noise, what I find is those 3 core behaviors from the first year of their business that generated most of their revenue. And then we reinstate them or protect them or make them better. And then they break through the plateau. Mm-hmm. Success is simple, and scale comes from subtraction and not addition. So if you think about this in the game of working out, the world's best athletes don't do 75 different movements. They master 3. Yeah. Right? It's squat, bench, and deadlift. And then your level of mastery determines your level of mastery of that movement, all the variations of it, all the activations of it, the strengths, the reps, the depths. That's what makes you the greatest. It's not having 70 different ways to do deadlifts. Yeah. It's having the one and going all the way down. And that's what entrepreneurship is. And that's the part that people don't get. It really, really is boring as fuck. And that's how I know it's predictable.
There's a couple different types of people. Mm-hmm. There are entrepreneurs, and then there's other people that are just happy to make a paycheck. Mm-hmm. Since I left the NFL, I have not made a paycheck.
No, me neither.
Like nobody's written me a check. Right. So everything that I've, within all these years, I mean, it's always been, eat what you kill, go out and you hustle and go and, basically entrepreneur. I've always been surprised by people that, what's my base? What's the minimum? And we talked about that yesterday. Is this like a cultural mindset? I mean, there's certain people you think are just designed to be entrepreneurs, or you think there's other people that are just happy to build somebody else's dream as long as they know the money's consistent?
You know what I think? I think it's the ones that are hungry are the ones that have found what truly light them up. And the ones that don't are so clouded and inundated with everybody else's bullshit, they have no idea what truly makes them happy. So they're willing to exchange and sacrifice their life for a paycheck. That's what I truly, truly think, because I've seen so many entrepreneurs, and we talked about this yesterday, right? Like, I love getting you riled up, but we'll do that on my podcast because I love when you go on your rants.
I do like to rant.
Especially like marketing rants. They just make my fucking heart so happy.
It's because it looks disingenuous to me.
I know. No, and you're right.
And I see it, and it sounds like it just like I get this spider sense, and I think it's probably from being in the NFL and probably hanging out in clubs and strip clubs and being around shady people just because it's a professional sport.
Well, and the reason I say you're right and I love it is because you have the stature, the perspective, and the chops to say it and have it mean it and it be real. And there's not many people calling it out, and it's a big thing. And I think, for everybody listening, I think there's a part of this too. I tell people all the time, and I'm very careful about when I bitch about internet marketing or what's happening, because there's 2 sides of the coin. There's complacency and complicitness. The complacency comes from the people doing it. The complicitness comes from the people listening to this that still make it okay and consume it. Yeah. Right. And so it's easy to bitch about it, but if you're also commenting on it, watching it, engaging it, and talking about it,
validating it,
then you're validating it. Right. Yeah. And so I speak about it, but I'm also like, I've made those mistakes and do it. But in generality, like, just be aware, I'm not calling it out. It's on both sides of the coin for everybody. But I think really, I've seen so many entrepreneurs, like on the conversation yesterday about eat what you kill, like I've met quite a few people like that. And I have similar, feelings as you do. Even though when I'm like in a really bad mood, I'm like, can somebody just write me a check today?
Believe me, I like if I'm in the exact same thing. I'd be like, it'd be just not easier just to cash a check. But so my dad was a trial attorney, worked for himself, private practice. And I asked him, Dad, like, how come you didn't go work at a big law firm? You could have partnered in this. And he's like, I was more than happy to bring home the money that I made. I wasn't willing to like put all my money in the pot and just get some meager salary. So one day, 30 years down the road, I could be a partner and do this. And then I was like, oh, okay. And then like years later, he's like, fuck, I should have been a partner. I would have been just cashing checks at home and this, but he still needed to go to court and hustle because that's how he lived. Yeah. He's like, what am I going to do? Like go play golf every day? And he loved to play golf, but he's like, people that play golf every day end up dying along, And he just like there has to be, this idea of like the day you stop being useful, you become useless.
Yes.
And so I'm constantly striving for like to be useful, to be able to execute tasks, to push things ahead and move and create and do this, because I'm so afraid of just like becoming useless.
Yeah. And so for me, the reason is like, I used to be like, I wasn't one of the eat what you kill guy, even as a consultant. Like I wanted a base because I knew my value, right? But I realized that I changed over the years, right? And it was a self-confidence thing, right? It was I've always wanted to kind of be an eat what you kill guy, right? But there was this like lack of belief. And so what I would do is I would borrow belief from other people. I'd get a retainer and then I would build my confidence. And then once I got a few of them, I'm like, oh yeah, no, like this works. Like, okay, cool. Fuck it. Throw it out the window. Like, let's just go here. Right. But there's this confidence. So I think it boils down to a few things, because I think truly I'm doing a breakdown on the book, The Talent Code, on my podcast right now by Daniel Coyle.
Oh,
right?
I spoke at a deal with Naval Special Warfare he was at.
Yeah.
And I've read the book. It's great.
And like to the point where I was like, no, every chapter kind of deserves its own episode right now. Right. And I think like one of the big ones is creativity, but also practice, right? Like, I think in that useful thing, I think what ends up happening is that we also often fall victim to our circumstance. Like, this is who I am. And for me, like, you're not who you are just because you work a 9 to 5. Like, that's not your identity. That's just a way that you're making money and exchanging time for money, but that's not your identity. You're not a secretary. You're not an admin assistant. You're not a copywriter. You're not a social media manager. Like, you're an incredible fucking human being that just happens to be using that as a way to express your talents into the world.
Sure.
Right. I think it starts with that, like at the core of it, like what's the difference between the people that want to go out and get it and the people that don't, I think are the ones that have a relationship with themselves at an integrous level, and the ones that don't know how to find that yet. Because there's people that find clarity in different ways. And so I think what it really boils down to is the secret is really identifying this relationship with yourself. And John knows this, like the premise of what I teach is that relationships beat algorithms, right?
Yeah,
like,
I love it.
And this came up because I was giving a keynote and I had the phrase, and I already had the phrase, but somebody asked a question, it pissed me off, and it was about marketing. And I just turned around and I yelled at him. And I was like, nobody has a fucking marketing problem. Everybody has a fucking relationship problem with themselves, their team, and their customers, informed in that order. And then I was like, wow, that's true.
You're like, I just struck gold.
And then I just like stopped for a minute. I'm like, whoa, yeah, that is it, right? And at the end of the day, the reason I say that is because the most important one is the one that we tend to neglect. And it's the one that we're guaranteed to spend the rest of our life with, which is ourselves.
Yeah.
But we live in a world where every time we have a feeling, we're conditioned that when our check engine light comes on, have somebody else diagnose it.
Yeah.
And then trust that what they say is what's wrong with it. Well, when was the last time you trusted the mechanic that overquoted you?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, there's a reason people don't trust mechanics. Read your own check engine lights.
There's a statement that you made that I use almost, if it's not every day, it's almost, at minimum every week. You can't go out and look for new children until you learn to take care of your present children.
Yeah. So the famous way that I say this is you can't adopt any more children until you feed the ones that you have.
That's it.
Right. And here's the thing. I'm gifted with perspective, right? I've taken 2 companies to $1 billion. I'm on my way with a third, right? And a small part, like not me, everybody in the team. I'm just my involvement in these things. And I will tell you this right now. There is not one successful company that's built on acquisition.
Yeah.
Every company that exists, that thrives, and that is successful is built on retention. And the big trap that everybody falls into is, if you look at the state of the world of marketing right now, everything is lack, right? How do I get more leads? How do I get more conversions? How do I get more sales? How do I get more calls? How do I get more boom? But like, you don't ever ask people, how do I keep more? How do I help them get better results?
That has been my exact deal of I want, and why we've had customers for 10 years, and I'll get on the phone. And when I did all the consults this last year, I mean, I've had people that were like CrossFit football and I've followed you for over 10 years.
Yeah.
And I think that's so indicative of the health of the company and the quality of the product and the issue, where you can actually have somebody through these different seasons of their life. Like I found you in the military, and then I retired, and now I'm the father, and and you see these people over the breadth of experience. And that's, in a way, I kind of viewed it a little bit like, not as a failure, but like, you know what, like, how come I'm not? And then when you told me, when you made that statement, I was like, Fuck, that's so true.
Yeah.
Because that's what people are in this constant burn of, hey, we got to get new people. And you put people into the funnel and then they don't care what happens. They just burn through. And then you eventually just burn through all your talent, like all your potential pool.
And the reason I'm so bullish on this, right? Like for everybody to understand like my journey as an entrepreneur, when I started, I started with an ebook, right? And I got lucky. But then when I became an entrepreneur, like when I made that first million, that wasn't great, by the way, because I didn't know about taxes and I was just a solo proprietor. So on December,
I'm rich.
So just for everybody to laugh with how shitty the business name was, but also for a very, very good chuckle. It was December 30th of 2014. December 30th of 2014. I remember this like it was the back of my hand. That was the year I made like the $1 million. And then Lindsay at the time was like, hey, we're gonna have to do your taxes. I was like, huh? And she's like, I have a tax guy. You know, they have to be done by like tomorrow, right? And I was like, huh? No, what? And so she introduces me and he sits down. He's like, all right, so here's the thing. And he puts a number and I was like, I make that much money? And he's like, no, you pay that much money. And it was $241,000. And I had $11,000 in the bank left. I didn't know. I was just like, oh, buy this. Yeah. Luckily, we incorporated the business in Wyoming as a C Corp, and I was able to defer and learn some like very, very, very
expensive,
painful,
yeah,
valuable lessons. But after those lessons, I ended up in the world of internet marketing, right? And I was like, oh, let's do upsells, let's do blank, let's do webinars, let's do boom. And I tried them. And this is the craziest part. I have all these records. Like I did this, people started doing like affiliate bundles and with ebooks. And I was like, I'll try one and I'll only do one because it feels good to me. Right. And I was like, hey, this is a bundle. I don't believe in the whole thing. I looked through the whole thing and I was like, these are the books I would recommend, but these are worth it for me. Boom, boom, boom. And I only emailed like 8,000 people and I set the affiliate record. And I would have these wins and then I would go to do them again and they would never work. Mm. And I was like, oh, and I didn't realize that I'd spent 3 to 4 years to build up that equity. And I'd made all these deposits into the ATM. And then I started making withdrawals, but I never made deposits again. Mm. And so I basically killed the company because I killed the relationships. And I only ever set the records on the first ones, like the first book, the first app, the first thing. And it took me years
to figure out longevity.
And I'm talking like I was the king of 6-figure businesses. I could launch a 6-figure business in 30 days, keep it for 6 months, and then have to launch another one. Like it was offer after offer, and none of them stuck. And it took me almost losing everything like 3 or 4 times to get this. And then it was in that process when I lost everything quite a few times. And really this happened during COVID. So in March of 2020, I lost everything again because we were at the height. Like I was probably clearing, probably $250,000 a month. Right. Just I had a mastermind. I had consulting companies I owned. It was at the height. And then, March of 2020, it basically dissipates in 68 days.
Sure.
I lose 2 companies. I lose the whole mastermind. Everybody's Amazon business is shut down. And like that, all that cash flow is gone. And I had nothing. And my whole entire job was consulting. It was you paying me in exchange for marketing information. Nobody was marketing during COVID at all. And so I was in hell again. But I had tools. I knew nobody was coming, John. Yeah. That sucked. Lindsay was asking me for a divorce. We're living in our brand new mountain house that now I don't have furniture in that I can't afford to live in with 4 new horses, 2 new cars, because everything was great. Yeah. And I called Stefanos, one of my best friends, and I cried for 30 minutes. And I mean angry cried. I was dry heaving. I was ventilating. Like I was in like savage mode where it was December. I'm outside barefoot in the snow in shorts. And I am like feeling like a primal warrior because I have snot coming down my face and I'm so upset. I'm rubbing it in. Like that's how hyperventilated upset I was. And I vent for like 45 minutes about how my life is over and boom, boom, boom. I get to the end of the call and literally, I'm not going to use his C word, but I said, what do I do? And he said, sit with it longer, motherfucker, and hung up on me. And we had a coaching call about how I was unable to sit with my emotions, and that's why I had no clarity. And so I knew what he meant. And this is going to sound really psycho, but one of my favorite books ever is The Comfort Crisis by Michael Easton.
Oh, excellent book.
Excellent book. Yeah. And talks about the term misogi. And it's something that I'm eerily familiar with because it's where I find my clarity. And so I made a rule and I was like, cool. I was in Mammoth and I was like, I'm going to hike every day until I get clarity. And so I said, I'm going to hike for a minimum of 4 hours a day, and I'm going to go every day until I get clarity. And John, it took 35 days.
Wow.
And I'll never forget, on that day, I get to the top and I sit on the rock and I just open my eyes. I close my eyes, I take a breath, I open my eyes, and I just broke down in tears and I just started crying. And I was like, I need to launch my podcast. And I'd bought a podcast microphone 7 years prior. And I was like, I'm going to launch a podcast one day. Should have fucking launched it, by the way, when I bought the microphone.
Yeah. What year did you buy the mic?
2010. Let's not talk about that mistake.
That is hilarious.
And then I was reminded in 11 and 12 by my producer friend. And so I didn't launch the podcast until 2020.
Which is the Mind of George.
Which is the Mind of George show. And so what I thought I was launching for everybody else, all I did was like, yep, I'm going to do 3 shows a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I did a Monday show for 5 minutes, which was mindset. I did a Wednesday show, which was a 10 to 20 minute tactic or strategy to implement immediately. And then I did a Friday show interviewing somebody about a lesson they learned. And I didn't realize I was basically recording my own workout protocol for what I needed. And I basically was like, yeah, I just lost, let's call it $300,000 a month in cash flow. I'm going to save my life by launching a podcast. And by the way, I had no social media, no website, and nothing, because I deleted it all when I walked away from Civilized Caveman.
Yeah.
And so from ground up, that was my great idea. And so I started it. And the only thing I did is I started putting up episodes. And then I had a Facebook group that had 500 people in it that I closed 3 years earlier. I reopened it and I said, hey, I'm coming back on the internet. I'm here to help. I posted a video every day for 7 days. Said I'd love to jump on a Zoom call with everybody. And this is when it all made sense about longevity.
Sure.
I put about 100 people on Zoom and I'm like, all right, here's the deal. I have a podcast up now. I want to do episodes to help you. I want to know what's going on in your businesses. I've lost everything and I'm starting again too. So let's just do it together. And I basically listened for an hour. And I had a Google Doc open. I was like just writing down everything they said. So I basically turned it into an outline. I'm like, all right, so this is what I'm hearing. And I looked at it. I'm like, I could teach them all of this in like probably 2 hours, like to the point where like this would fix most of their business issues they were having. And so I looked at them all and I was like, all right, hey, I have an idea. I was like, let me make this into something real quick. And I show them all. There's 100 people on Zoom. I was like, I could record this entire course tomorrow if that would be helpful. And they're like, yeah. And like on this call, people on this call were on this call. And this is 2020. There were people on this call that followed me as a food blogger in 2012 that were just like, I've been here the whole time. You've always responded. You've been there. I was off the internet for 3.5 years. And these were calls with me coming back on. These people were sitting dormant in a Facebook group for 3 years, but they'd never bought from me, but I'd always respond to their messages. I was always super helpful. And so I outlined this thing and they're like, this would literally save our businesses. And I was like, cool. Someone be fair and pick a number that you think this is worth. And that's the number you'll all pay. And someone said $750. And I was like, done. There were 100 people on the call. And I was like, if you guys pay me tonight, I will record this all day tomorrow and I will have it up in 2 days. 98 of them paid me that night, $750 each. I went to work the next morning. I recorded videos for 12 hours. I did the whole course, had it up the next day. And that became my first Lighthouse Method course back on the internet in March of 2020. And those were the first listeners of my podcast, were those 50 to 100 people from that Facebook group that I started from scratch again in March of 2020.
Now, your piece on customer journey should be required reading, required listening for anybody that wants to get into running a business, whether it be brick and mortar, on the internet, whatever it is, to understand and to put yourself through that customer journey. Like that piece was like I still have notes in my backpack.
Yeah. And I'm going to share, I think it's important for everybody listening. Like I'll share 3, because I think too, like my event's designed for you. Like you're coming, you've been, and you're speaking at the next one in November
which
in
I'm
Montana.
super excited about.
And just so I'll say it now before I forget, for everybody, it's really easy. I have the pinkest website in the world. I have my pink boots on for John today, by the way.
So there's this certain color of bubblegum pink that George is such a genius that when I see it, I instantly think George. My daughters were like, there was something and it was like Barbie-esque and like popped up on YouTube and they were watching something. I saw the pink and I was like, I got to text George.
Yep.
And then I laughed and I was like, it's like Pavlov's dog. I see pink and I think of George. It's so fucking smart.
So it's called a social trigger. So at the event, I actually teach you guys how to do this, by the way. It's why I've never had to run paid media, because I understand real marketing, which 93% of marketing is word of mouth, by the way, just for the record. But good book for everybody listening. Jonah Berger's other book, Contagious, breaks down why social triggers like that work and why I use the color pink, because just for everybody wondering, every ounce of it is intentional.
I know.
John,
I know.
John knows.
Yeah, no, it's fucking genius, man. I like, and like there's an origin story, and like I don't like, and I know the origin story is probably true.
It is,
and I know it's
100%
I know it's 100% true. But there's like an origin story for it. And I'm hearing George like weave the origin story, and there's emotion. He's taking people on this roller coaster, and it culminates with him embracing pink.
Yep.
And I'm just like, I'm writing this down and I'm like, I cannot fucking believe this, that I'm seeing this happen. And like the cool part is I felt like I was like, you know, had this like transcendental kind of like moment where I was like back, like watching all of these people like go on this journey, and you like were taking them and they were like living in tears and this. And I'm just like to see this fucking happen in real time. Like I've seen it just a fraction of times, as I told you. And it was so well done. But the thing is I know the stories are true.
Yeah.
I'll just give you a little example. Steve Mariucci was my coach at California Golden Bears when I was at Cal. He came in, was there 1 year, and then went to go be the head coach for the Raiders. So he comes in and he brings in this huge, like old, like pump, you know, like people would have like a water pump.
Yeah.
And he's telling this story where he's like, you know, me and my brother, I grew up in Iron Mountain, Michigan. I still even remember this. And he's like, you know, we went out to like, my dad had this cabin and we were out there working all day and it was super hot. And my dad goes, you know, go over and, you know, get some water out of that pump. So he's over there pumping the pump and he's sweating and he's telling the story about him and his brother working this pump. And he's like, Dad, it's not coming. It's not coming. And he's like, you have to get some water and you have to prime the pump. So then they run down to like this creek and they get like a little bit of water and they come down and they're like pumping and they're pouring, and he's going through this whole fucking story. And like, it was so captivating. And the whole analogy was like, you have to have your pump, you got to prime the pump. And then like, once you do the hard work, like everything will flow. And he gives this story. Like everybody in the fucking room was on their feet. It was the best fucking story I've ever heard. I love it. So years later, he leaves. I mean, obviously he left that year, goes to the Niners. I don't see him for a couple of years. I'm at the combine and I see him. I'm like, Mooch, what's up? And we're sitting there talking. And I was like, man, I never got a chance to tell you how much I appreciated your Iron Mountain pump story. And he's like, what? And I was like, remember the story about the pump? And he's like, you believe that shit? I made that up. I found that fucking pump in a secondhand store. And he's like, I totally just came up with that fucking story on the fly to try to motivate you guys. You believe that shit?
Yep. I
fucking shattered into a million pieces. I was like, I'm fucking such a maroon. I'm such a dipshit. I cannot believe this fucking guy lied about this.
Yeah.
And then when you were giving your origin story, I mean, knowing how, you know, that you have integrity unlike he doesn't, I was like, fuck, man, like it was as good a story in that moment because I mean, people like the seal with your son and they sent him home and said that, you know, boys can't wear pink. And then you decide it's fucking great.
Yeah, it was good. And you know, you just said something that reminded me. So just to close loop. So the website is mindofgeorge.com/event. I'll give you the spiel on it in a minute, but you know, we were talking earlier about permission slips in the event, right? And somebody asked me to describe what I do at my event. And I answered it with what my intention is. And this is around the permission slip. And my intention with my event is that I believe in what you can achieve so much more than you do, that you can borrow some of it from me to expand your own belief capacity until you have enough to believe it on your own.
Oh shit. Oh fuck, man.
That's how I coach people.
That's great.
And that's what it is, because that's actually what it is, because I don't live in the pill bottle. I can see the game for what it is. And because I can see the game without the perspective of being in the pill bottle, I can hold it. And my job is to hold it. But if I'm holding 10 steps or 20 steps, I also have to hold 19 of them, knowing you can only see the next one. That's what I call the burden of leadership, is having the capacity, the integrity, and the resiliency to hold the next couple of steps, knowing that you can only give them the first. And I think that's why most people lose, is because they don't have patience, and it's transactional. And that's what leadership requires, is patience, right? It's not about handing them a fish. It's about handing them a fishing pole and then showing them how to use it and then letting them mimic your behaviors until it becomes secondhand, and then they change fishing poles and you do it again. Like that's what it boils down to. And I think that's really, really important, because I think one of the biggest secrets, and I'll say this, the only reason my podcast exists, the only reason my events exist, I will tell you this, and John will tell you this, they are not to make me money.
Yeah.
I do not make money at them.
No, you spend way more money. I mean, you were giving out gel blasters and this, and like, I was like, how is he fucking, like, he's not making any money at this fucking
I'm
event.
not, and we charge costs for tickets, but here's what I give you. I
don't even know if you knew this, but you invited me to the event and I went and I bought a ticket anyway.
I did. I saw that after.
Yeah. So you invited me, please come. And they shot me a deal. I just went and bought a ticket. And I think if, for your friends, as much as I love to be invited, I enjoy paying for their talents and their services.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that you invited me, but I was more than happy to buy a ticket.
And I love that about you. And I appreciate that. But the reason I say this is I think that this is a lesson that everybody could really benefit from. The faster you get around people that remind you that you have the answers, the faster you're going to win. And that's it, right? Like I'm not here. We don't sell at our event. Like people ask can they work with us? And I spend 6 minutes answering the question. I'm like, can we stop this now and get kind of back to work, right? For me, my success boils to community. And it's not a community of people that do my workouts for me. It's a community of people that are standing in the gym staring at me, not allowing me to cheat my reps.
Yeah.
That's what makes me successful. That's what makes you successful. And I think the faster we get that, there's nothing wrong with not believing it. There's nothing wrong with feeling sad. Like that's the other thing I want to suck out of the fucking room. Everybody thinking that this shit's easy, or talking about it like it's easy, or that everything's a great day. They are just blowing fucking smoke, and they're popping Xanaxes when nobody's looking, because this is not easy. It's not fun to go against the world, to have every stack of resistance there, and to fight corporations and algorithms and business and undercutting and theft and the internet and AI. Like, no, it's not fucking easy. We gave up a paycheck. It doesn't mean it's always going to be easy, but the faster you get honest about it, the faster you win. And I can't fucking stand when people pretend it's easy. It's not. I have more down days than I have up days. In how I see it, I don't believe it, but it doesn't like go away. And I think the faster that everybody like eliminates this, it's when I get $1 million, my days are easy, or when I have 7 employees that won't be there. No, it's going to be 7 times worse.
Oh yeah, it's 100% worse.
Right. And I think the more that we normalize the fact that like that this isn't necessarily glamorous, but it's still fun. Like I remember fucking football camp. You couldn't pay me to do 3 a days, but I also remember moments in them when I loved finding that savage in me and like enjoyed the process.
Oh man, I love going to football camp.
I know. And there's a part of me.
I just side note, man, like and this sounds really twisted. So the thing that I used to love about football camp wasn't day one, right? Like, cause everybody was hit, everybody was fired up, ready to go. And it was like live bullets. I like day like 7 and 10 and 14 and 22 and 24, where all of a sudden you come in and a rookie's just sitting there like somebody shit him out of something. And they're just like broken and they're tired and this. And I would like somehow draw energy out of their misery. And I'd be like, oh, today that's the motherfucker I'm going to get. And I used to fucking love that, because I have this insane like consistency thing where it's like the effort, like, your effort might be like a fractional more, but like my effort's not going to fall off. I'm going to give you day one's going to be like day 24 and day 54 and day 154. Whereas all these other people were like peak. And I used to tell people, I'm like, dude, it's about pacing. It's about longevity. Can you put the consistent amount of work in every day to be the fucking best? So Jeff Spencer, right? Do you know Jeff? Mm-mm. Okay. So Dr. Jeff, he's responsible for like 70 gold medals at the Olympics. He's an Olympian himself. He was Tiger Woods' coach, Lance's coach. He's a dear friend and a client, but he's the one who taught me about temperance. And he's like, you have to understand that the people that win gold medals win because they understand 70%. They live their life at 70. And then when they need to, they can sprint to 100. They'll drop down to 50 and recover at 70. Yeah. That's what champions do. And like the whole reason I built that wedge of expectations is just to protect that consistency, because temperance is really, really the secret. Well, I mean, people do this with working out, like, oh, I'm going to go in the gym and I'm going to kill it today. And then they're either so sore or they fry themselves where they can't train the next day or the next day. And then they might not see them for a week. Yeah. And I'd be like, just come in and just give me some consistent effort. Just start a pattern, start a habit. Yes. And then all of a sudden it gets really, really consistent. And I don't need you to smash it every day. Mm-mm. I just need you to be able to put enough bricks in this thing to where all of a sudden we get to the very end that you have enough juice to be able to go fucking smash people.
Well, and that's what it boils down to, because the nature of the game that we play as well is that it changes every day. The internet changes, social media changes, the habits, the consumption. Like to think that you can solve the things that are happening in the world or business things linearly is just a falsehood that's going to kill you, right? You can't. Nothing is linear, right? And I think it's important because all the stuff that we're talking about is also the same stuff that applies to business, right? Like the people that lose now thinking they can control how many likes or comments they get, stop them from producing consistent content that would increase the amount of likes and comments they got.
Sure.
Right. But they're measuring the day rather than measuring the impact of visibility over 30 days, realizing that the normal person takes 100 touch points anyways.
Touch points. We interrupt this episode with a shameless self-promotion. Power Athlete delivers battle-tested performance programming for every kind of athlete. So do you want to go from average Joe to MVP? Then dominate with Field Strong. Get stacked and jacked with Jack Street. Hustle in life and still build muscle with Grindstone. Fear no opponent with Dragon Slayer. Be harder than coffin nails with Hammer. Max out minimal equipment with Lean Enable. Or unlock those newbie gains with Bedrock. Get over to powerathletehq.com/training and choose your 7-day free trial right here, right now. Get lifting, get training, get in shape, all while listening to the rest of this show. So when I think about like kind of some archetypes and the type of people that at least that I subscribe to and where I listen to, but the people that I kind of subscribe to, I know, but then like there's such really interesting pieces like you, as an expert in this, like you've created your ethos, you've done this. I mean, you do a great job of building it and you've thought through, and it's anybody listening to this knows that you're a thoughtful dude and have worked through these things. Then you have a guy like Joe Rogan, for example, right? Joe is, I think the reason he's successful is because he's commonly curious. You get on his podcast and he brings on these people and you hear him go, whoa.
Yep.
And he's like a fan.
Yep.
And he's curious and he asks the questions, explain this. And he just happens to sit with the smartest people in the room who treat him well because they know the fucking power he wields.
Yes.
So he's sitting there with some of the smartest dudes on the planet and they're like, I'll explain it to you, Joe. And like, whereas if somebody else who wasn't him asked him these questions, they probably would have fucking vaporized him.
Yep.
But like, because he wields such an amazing power sword that they just are like, Joe, let me explain it to you. And the audience gets to almost go on Joe's journey.
Yeah.
But he's a smart motherfucker too, but it's really fascinating. Like he's not maybe he is. I mean, I would never think of him as an expert. I don't listen to him unless it's in MMA or fighting or some, comedy. He's a fucking black belt. I saw him with Dave Chappelle and it was Joe Rogan during COVID lockdown at Stubbs. Yeah. And they were, Chappelle fucking had probably smoked whatever Rogan smoked and drank like a dozen beers and was fucking awful.
Yeah.
Oh, he was so fucked up. But then I got to see his comedy special that he did the bit. And like it was 8,000 times better. So he's probably still working through his stuff. And, it was COVID.
Yeah.
But like for his show and the people he brings on, it's like this interesting level of curiosity that gets to take the people. So you have this kind of almost polar where you're like, I'm an expert, but then you have this stuff. And then there's all these people in the middle that I'm not sure what the fuck they're doing. And so I always wonder, like, is it a certain archetype that applies to a certain people based on where they are in the need? Or is it that we're just consumers and different voices speak to us?
I actually think it's the depth of the content more than anything. Like you nailed it in your answer, right? Like Joe's content is approachable and it's within grasp of the average person listening to it, right? My content, for example, my content by design is never going to get a lot of engagement because the level of depth required to engage with it, right? That's not the behavior that matches the platform it's on. The platform it's on Instagram is 3-second scrolls through Reels and TikTok. So at best, I'm going to get some listeners and some things there, but there is a gap and a disparity between that, right? And so I think when you were asking that, one thing that kept coming up for me is I think one of the easiest ways to win is to show them, not tell them, right? And Joe does that so incredibly well. I can break down who does that so incredibly well because the show them is what makes it approachable and consumable for the people that want to watch it. And when I do my content as well, like when I produce my content, I think the other thing that makes content good or not good is having the full understanding of what's required to get people to consume content. Now, somebody's attention span is still only 3 seconds right now, but when was the last time you were driving down the road and somebody just threw a random fact at you and you were open, ready to receive it and remembered it? You wouldn't, but that's how people treat social media, right? Yeah. They forget that like someone's just scrolling. There's no context whatsoever, but yet we put one clip up or one reel up or one thing up, right? And so we have to remember that there's still human behaviors happening, right? And what you'll watch on like a lot of content that does really, really well is at the very beginning or early stages after a hook, they also very quickly establish the what and the why before they ever get into the how, because they give somebody a reason to want to listen or to want to learn. Mm-hmm. And it's a way that they can understand. And I watch a lot of people struggle with content, not because their content is bad, that they simply forget how far away they are from their ideal client, right? And it's like asking you to teach somebody who's never been in the gym about structure and functional movements of powerlifting.
Or just lifting weights in general. I'll see somebody teach something that's so basic and I'll be like, oh shit, I forgot there's people that this is their first day.
Yeah. And so one of my easiest tilts for this, and this is one of the best quotes I've ever heard from a shaman. He said this to me and he said, this is the easiest way. A student says, I already know, and a master says, thanks for the reminder. Mm.
So you've obviously done a little bit of psychedelics.
A little bit.
How did that, was it, because I'm on another podcast called The Everyday Warrior with Through Men's Journal with Doc Parsley and Mike Sorelli. Doc's fucking great. We've had a huge string of doctors and people and military guys that have done amazing things that have had a similar deal to you, where they got out, they were through the VA on opiates and suicidal, and then they somehow get into this plant-based medicine, ayahuasca, ibogaine, psilocybin, and it completely changes, it restructures, it fixes everything. And so I keep hearing this thread come through, and I know for you it was a life-changing event.
Oh, 1,000%. And as somebody, and I actually have never talked about this on a podcast.
Oh, well, you heard it here, folks.
So I'm 39. The first drug I ever did besides a prescription drug was weed. And I smoked weed for the first time when I was 35 years old. So my entire journey in all of this is 5 years old, everything. Prior to that, when I met my wife, this was in 2012. She had a small bag of weed in the house, and I told her that she belonged in federal prison and that I wouldn't speak to her or date her until I was out of the house, because my whole life was social services and drugs. And then I was in the Marine Corps with piss tests every 30 days. Right. So that was just for context, I thought you belonged in federal prison for weed 6 years ago. Not that I would ever pursue that, but that was my relationship with it. And the reason that I ended up with psychedelics was, in this whole process, the hospitalizations were 3 times. I'd done cognitive behavioral therapy, prolonged exposure. I had done the entire standard care, every single option. And nothing was getting better. And we were just kind of at our wits' ends. And my Lindsay at the time was like, I just want you to try weed. I just want you to try it, right? Just try it. And so this is how bad I was. I lived in California at the time. I called the weed shop because I get it delivered. I'm like, listen, I've never smoked weed before. I need you to bring me everything, but I need one of you to sit with me, and I'm going to pay you, and you're going to teach me how to do this. And so I had one of the guys that deliver my weed sit down. Yeah. And I can't get high. And so one of the side effects of having a PCA pump in for 7 months is my liver oxidizes meds now. So I can't get high on weed. I can't get numb at the dentist. Opiates don't really work on me anymore. But I ended up getting some benefits. I slept that night. Mm-hmm. And so I just started using Delta 8 edibles and CBD, and I would start to feel better. So it kind of I was like, wow, this isn't bad. It kind of titrated me in, and things weren't getting better. And then I had a therapist who said, I really think you should do MDMA assisted psychotherapy. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I don't know what that is. She's like, yo, do ecstasy. And I was like, oh shit. And I was scared, right? Because I'd never done anything. Yeah. Anything. And I'll never forget this. And so I agree, I do it. And I've now facilitated a lot of these and done this many, many times. But she kind of runs me through it. And she's like, yep, we're here for you. If you want to talk, you can talk. If you want to listen to music. And it was just kind of whatever you want. And so initially I'm walls up, PTSD. I'm my life is over, fuck off, right? And then it hits. And all of a sudden I'm a goddamn Care Bear, right? I just want to run and spread fucking rainbows and unicorns on everybody, right? But I can't stop talking. And so I was like, is it okay if I talk? And she's like, yeah, bro, I talked for 3 hours. And I mean, without taking, my heart rate was like 135. I wear a heart rate monitor for this thing. Like I probably burned like 5,000 calories. Don't wear a heart rate monitor on ecstasy or MDMA, by the way. I don't recommend it. But it was crazy because it was like, I've explained this to people, right? So what ended up happening is I started talking, and the more I talked, the more I had to talk. And it was like, and I was going through trauma, combat, boom, boom, boom. And then at like the 3 hour mark, I hit this point and I said a word, and then I looked at her and I was like, I don't have any words left.
I'm done.
And she's like, what would you like to do? And I'm like, listen to music. And then I just laid back and I put on the Hans Zimmer Superman soundtrack. I don't even know where I went, but I went somewhere and I was just happy and at peace. And somebody's like, what does it look like? I'm like, what it felt like is that I've been dehydrated, overheating and hot, and I'm standing on a boat in the middle of the ocean. And I want to jump in, but there's 10 feet of pollution on the top. And I just spent 3 hours clearing the pollution so I could jump in the water for the first time. Because that's the first time I'd ever talked about any of that.
Yeah.
And I got to talk about it in this place without judging it. And then I realized that I had just never talked about it. And I was a different man the next day. Irregardless of how I felt about it. Like my body felt different. Everything felt different. And I was like, whoa. And just things felt easier. I saw things differently. And then that was kind of like, oh, there's something here. And then the rest of my plant medicine journey up to this day has been very meticulous and very, very slow. And here's my thing. Plant medicine does not give you something you don't have. It speeds up the process of you finding it. That's all. That is it, right? Like, and a lot of the work I've done now, and I've sat with ayahuasca many times, and psilocybin and MDMA and ketamine, and I've done mostly everything now. And I haven't sat with plant medicine in probably like 18 months, and I have to feel.
What was your experience with ayahuasca? Didn't you like go somewhere in the Amazon?
Well, I went down to Costa Rica. So I've gone to Costa Rica 4 or 5 times. So I think I've sat with ayahuasca 20 times. But on a typical trip, we'll sit with 4 and we'll do 4 ceremonies, like 4 nights in a row. My ayahuasca ceremony, they were hell. They were like combat for me the first time, because I remember I went down the first time and I'm like, I'm here because my life is over, right? Like I want it better. And I was like, yeah. So I went in the first night, I'm like, give it to me. And I drank it all like nothing. And then the next day I was like yelling at a shaman. I'm like, fuck you. I paid like X amount of dollars for this and I'm not getting anything. And they're like giving me life advice. And they're like, where else does this show up in your life? And boom, boom, boom. And then the next night I was like broken down and I was so angry, and I drank it again, and I was like physically sick and I was just miserable. And then the next day I didn't sleep and I was so angry, John. Like I remember talking to Brad and he just kept pegging me, like he was trying to get out of me. And then I finally released the last bit and I broke down in tears and I just bawled, and then I just like had nothing left. And I was like, I quit. And he's like, okay, just stay here. And then we walked in. And then the ceremony started in like an hour, and like the first 2 nights, and with ayahuasca, every night's different. The brew's different, right? And sometimes it's a cup, sometimes it's 5, but those first 2 nights, man, I had like 4 cups and nothing. This night, dude, I had a half a cup and it hit my lips, and I swear in 5 minutes, I was in a different world. And normally it takes like 30, 35 minutes. And that was one of the most beautiful nights of my life. But what I was faced with was every addiction, every childhood trauma, every pattern. And I was facing my father, who's not here. And my father was an addict, and I had convinced myself I never wanted to end up like my father, except I just chose different behaviors and justified them. And so when you're on the medicine, or at least for me, that night, there was no, I'm on the medicine. There was a, this is my life right now. And I was faced with a choice, and the choice was to either heal my addiction or not. And to heal my addiction, I had to bury myself alive in my father's grave.
Oh, Jesus.
And that was the night of my ego death. And I'll never forget, because there was like one moment, and like this was like a horror movie for me, where I was like down to the last part and I was like, it's about to go dark. And I remember that moment, and I was like, I'm never going to see my son again in this life, ever. It felt like I was there for an eternity, but I knew I couldn't go back. That was probably like one of the hardest moments of my life. And it's so hard to explain because I'm on a plant medicine, right? I'm laying on a mattress in the middle of a jungle, right? But like,
Do you know, like, is there, because I've never done ayahuasca, like, I mean, I know you're in this moment, but is there something in the back of your head that you know that you're in, like, this is...
For me in that one, there are times on plant medicine that I have that. And this was one of those times that I didn't, but I also felt so transcended above like the existential meat suit. I got it. Like there was peace, but there was fear because like it was a surrender. Like all I had to do was really like metaphorically throw that last piece of dirt.
Yeah.
That last piece of dirt was light. I couldn't let go. There was this control thing, this fear thing, and I finally did. And it instantly, and I mean instantly, went from the darkest night of my life to one of the most beautiful things that I've ever witnessed in my life. I got to witness my birth again. I was reborn into my spirit animal, my son's birth, every positive moment of my life, like something I can never, ever, 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 ever understand. The closest thing that I have is the first time that I told somebody I met God in a firefight. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, you don't need to ask me. I know they're real because none of this makes sense, right? Like it's just like this, the divinity, the love, the ultimate safeness, the understanding. Like I was like, oh, I get the cosmic joke. Like I get what matters. Like I get it. And then I will say the part for me that really, 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 really matters is that drinking the medicine and getting the awareness is 1% of the game. Integrating the behaviors and keeping them without the medicine is the other 99.
Yeah.
Because it gives you what you didn't have that you'll find through 20 years of therapy or anything. And it also heals the emotion and gives you the perspective, but it doesn't give you the new behaviors or the discipline to follow them. And my relationship with plant medicine has been, there's been plenty of times where I've had clarity. I'm like, oh, I'm stuck. I need medicine again. And I went and did a ceremony and had some of the darkest nights of my life. And it's like, oh, you're back and you still haven't done those things. Mm-hmm. And then you're like, oh, got it. Right. Because you can't hide from you. It's not my logical brain that I'm having a conversation with on plant medicine. It's my soul.
Does everybody have to do 4 days? Or there's certain people that just do one?
Well, it depends on where you go. So like I always recommend, like if you're ever going to go, you go somewhere where it's done. And my buddy Jerry owns Rhythmia in Costa Rica, and it's the shamans come up from Colombia, but it's a different shaman and brew every night. And the entire experience is curated over 7 days to be an entire thing. So there's breath work, there's colonics, there's meals, there's liberation dances, there's things in between the ceremonies that integrate the whole practice. Mm-hmm. And then there's other places, like there's plenty of places in Peru and Costa Rica where you can go down and you'll be like straight in the Maloca and you'll be out there with their process. Soltara is another wonderful place in Costa Rica. So everybody is a little bit different in how they do it. I prefer bougie, and Jerry built a nice resort with like 5-star hotel rooms and beautiful Malocas and AC, good. And the food is incredible. My friend Meg's the chef. It's great, right? And but it's different for everybody. And there's also different brews of ayahuasca, right? And there's different types of plant medicine, and it can all be used different ways. And I just tell everybody that you have to respect it. It's a tool, right? It's a tool. It's like giving somebody a weapon, but it depends on how you yield it, if it's positive or not, right? And I think that that's a big part of it, because I think all too often, like I was hesitant jumping in, but I've seen people on the other side that are really like excited to jump in, and then they don't have the best experiences ever, right? It's just like anything. You have to be intentional. You have to kind of know what you're looking for, have an awareness, and kind of pursue it, but pursue it integrally, like, and safely, and like really do your due diligence, because it's also one of those things that's kind of being, commoditized and celebrated right now.
I have one of the guys that trained at our gym. I don't know if you know a guy named CK Lind, but he trained
I've heard the name.
Yeah, he's in Newport, and he's kind of this entrepreneur CEO, kind of takes people on these kind of CEO ayahuasca.
Oh yeah.
And so I connected with him, and he's like, "Oh man, Austin's like the hotbed for this thing."
Yeah.
And then he asked me, and I was like, I know a ton of people. Like Doc Parsley did it. Saw nothing.
Yeah.
Like it didn't affect him.
And some people are like that.
And then one person had like, one sip on like day one and like floated for 4 days. And like, he's like, it was the craziest thing. He goes, I've never seen like one substance elicit that many responses.
Well, and here's the thing, like I was like I'm the ultimate skeptic, right? I was like dug in, right? And I come out of the Marine Corps, right? And I remember Lindsay was like, well, you have PTSD, like you need to get work done. I'm like, no, I read a book. Like that was it. That's what I told her. I read a book and like I was healed. Right?
I read The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein, and I'm
like,
totally
yeah,
fine.
Exactly. Right. I'm like, oh, you want me to go to the jungle and drink jungle juice?
Dude, if I ever need to recalibrate, I just go read The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein.
Yeah,
that's
when
good. You said like read. Yeah, no, it's still great, and I have it in my house, and I try to read it, and I've read it with my kids, and they're like, I'm like, fuck, like you're not old enough, you'll figure it out, But like that's kind of what I view. Not everybody's lost, but if you go looking, you usually find what you're looking for.
Well, and here's the thing, right? You can go drink ayahuasca or you can go read the book, The Comfort Crisis. You're going to end up in the same place.
Yeah.
Truth be told, what I think is some plant medicines, they're either, right? Because you have the masculine, feminine side too. Like there's masculine plants, feminine side, right? Ayahuasca is very feminine. So like,
and then I think the father's the Abigail.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
they call it the mother and the father.
Yeah, and Wachuma is also the masculine side of ayahuasca. So ayahuasca is the feminine side. Wachuma, San Pedro is the masculine side. Typically done during the day, and ayahuasca done at night. But on those dark nights of like burying myself in my father's grave, right? It wasn't like I was cold and out. I felt so loved and so safe and so held and so supported, right? But then I've had some nights where I've used marijuana in deep meditation, and it's a very powerful plant when used that way, but it's very masculine and cold, and so are mushrooms for me. And so when I met with those dark days in mushrooms, it's like, for lack of better terms, you piece of fucking shit, right? But kind of more loving. Like there's nowhere to hide. It's just me versus me. It's cold. It's there, right? So the thing with plant medicine is it never gives you anything you don't need, but it's just yours. It's a complete independent experience. And most of the active ingredients, mushrooms, ibogaine, ayahuasca, is DMT. That is the same DMT that your pineal gland produces when you do breath work and when you have near-death experiences. And so my understanding through my own stuff of this is that like what plant medicine does is helps me and my body produce something that I can naturally produce, but at a faster rate to get more clarity or downloads or information if I'm willing to handle it and face it, that can help me speed up a healing process. Because I also do breath work and I facilitate breath work. And I have had more powerful psychedelic experiences in breath work than I have on ayahuasca or DMT.
Oh, shit.
And we do this at our events. We have it. We have people be a part of it. But we've had people in our events in the middle of like a mastermind type event.
I loved going to your Lighthouse event. The worst part about it is here in Austin.
Yeah.
So I was still required.
Next one's in Montana.
Well, I know, but I was still required to do like dad stuff. Like I had to go to baseball and this, and I'm literally like dropping the kids off, running back, like doing this, like still living like this. And I've told George, he's like, what'd you think? I'm like, I love that I got to go. I'm just sad that I had to do it here in Austin because I couldn't embrace everything because of, obviously work and family, and I got a wife and 3 kids and all these other things that like, even though you have an event, like you're still home.
Oh, I know.
So it's, that's why I was excited when you asked me to come present at the one in November.
In Montana. And the reason I say that too is like, I watch people facilitate breath work, but we've done it. We've had somebody in breath work come out and be like, I just healed my inner child. Like, I don't know what that means. And I'm like, incredible, right?
That sounds amazing.
It's great, right? But we also
Can you leave a Trustpilot review?
We have plenty of moments in our life where we might have things happening or things get bad, and we get a catalyst or a pattern interrupt that gives us perspective, right? So my methodology is like proactively find those things, right? Ayahuasca, plant medicine, they're a tool. So is breath work. So is walking. So is silence. So is meditation. But you're going to find a similar thing for me no matter what, is no matter which tool you pick. I just care that you pick one and you use it consistently and you make it work, not hope it's going to work.
So years ago, I got invited to present for this like entrepreneurial group. And so they invited me to come to one of the events to see if I would keynote and speak for him. And Aubrey Marcus was there speaking. And it was the first time I'd ever met him and heard him speak. And it was all about like ayahuasca and searching for the darkness. And he had gone this and like had traveled all over the world. And it just seemed so I'm not gonna use the word disingenuous, just so like just weirdly fake. Like I was like, is this is like a book, like it feels like somebody wrote the story and he was telling it. And I'm like, what did the next one give you that this one didn't? And it was this constant search, and I was like, you know what, like I don't know, I was just kind of left there a little more confused by it. And since being on the podcast with Doc Parsley, I've listened to these amazing stories of how it's healed these individuals that have had this tremendous amount of trauma. So I wonder, like, I think fucking opiates are the worst thing on the planet.
Facts. Facts.
The observation I've always made is that the guys that I observed in the NFL that took the most amount of opiates seem to have the most amount of problems today.
Yes.
I think that there's something in, I forgot the medical term, but they're much like there's like a lining of our gut. There's also one in the brain. And I think the opiates eat through that blood-brain barrier, and it just causes a ton of issues. So the brain can't heal. So anything that we can do, and I used to say this too in the NFL, I'm like, okay, you're going to give this guy a bottle of pills, but then you're going to test him for marijuana. And even though I'm not a cannabis weed guy, I would much rather have somebody smoke some weed than take and get addicted to these painkillers, right? So you're going to vilify one, and then or demonize one, and then fucking put the other one on a pedestal.
Yeah.
And the same thing with all these psychedelics. I mean, they're going to pump you through all these psychotropics and this, but then all of a sudden, hey, I can go do this psilocybin or do this, medicine, plant-based medicine, and it might potentially heal. It might. I mean, it just seems so logical to me that that is a better option than fucking having somebody wait at the VA trying to get his meds balanced.
Yeah, well,
before he kills himself.
MAPS exists, right? Like Rick Doblin, who I've met, and Aubrey helped him talk about. Rick founded MAPS, and he's been working on the legalization of like MDMA and psilocybin since like 1982, and he's the one that got it through phase 4 clinical trials and now legally approved. But
it's awesome.
They showed the FDA that with and I'm relatively close on this number, but with psilocybin, with 3 successive treatments, that they had an 84% success rate in curing depression. And then with MDMA, 81% success rate with 1 session of eliminating most of the anxiety. 1.
So when I worked security in San Francisco, I used to work at this club called 1015 Folsom DNA Lounge, and these kids would come in just fucking whacked on ecstasy.
Yeah.
And when I watched these kids would dance, and they had so much fun.
Fun.
I was like, I don't know how, it looks like it's curing depression. I don't know if there's more depression the next day when they try to reboot their hard drive, but man, those kids had a good time.
For me, what it was is I'll never forget that therapist that did my MDMA. When she was talking to me, I was telling her that I was a robot, and I was like, here's the biggest problem. Like, I'm numb. I can't be fixed. And she looked me dead in the eye and she's like, numb is a feeling. And it like broke me, because that was my wall, right? Like, I can't feel I'm numb. I can't feel I'm numb. Leave me alone. I'm numb. And she like shattered it. And then when I did the MDMA, I'd felt a feeling that I'd never felt before. I had never felt that level of happiness in my entire life that I could remember. There wasn't an anchor or a memory that came back.
Once you felt it, was it easy to access it?
Yeah, it never went away. It never went away. It reset my range. I just didn't know it existed. And so once it stretched, like, holy moly, like, I can feel this way. This is like possible. It massively increased my range. And then I was like, holy moly, like everything gets better. But then the inverse is also lows get lower, right? Because the range increases, right? Yeah. And so, but that was a big part of it. Like, I didn't think I could feel joy, John. Like, I didn't think I could feel happy. Like, I would be conditioned. People want to do things. I'm like pooping on it. No. And then there would be pockets in my day where like my son would do something and I'm like, wow, like I might really like be able to love my son. Like, and I know that sounds silly, but those are things that didn't feel possible.
No, there's there's a whole fucking world full of broken men who were raised by fathers that couldn't show love.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it wasn't acceptable. Like, I remember as a little kid, like always shaking my dad's hand. And when I went away to college, I came back and I remember like hugging became kind of more of a thing. Like, you play with black dudes and this in college. Like, it was always like dap them up. And I came home and I like hugged my dad, and he was like so uncomfortable. He was like, he went to put his hand in, I just blew past it and hugged him. And I was like, it's great to see you. And he like locked up on me, and it took him like me hugging him every time I saw him before and after leave to finally like relax a little bit, years.
Yeah. And
like, I still don't ever remember him like actually giving me the type of embraces that I give my son. And I remember being like, we're going to work on this. And he's like, but he didn't grow up with that.
Yep.
You know, and the joke I told on the podcast recently when I was on with Andy was when I started doing jits with the Brazilians, they hug like when as soon as I see them, we get done. So there's like 3 hugs a day. And I joke that like I've collectively hugged these guys more than my parents have ever hugged me. My mom's ever hugged me. But just culturally, there's a lot of broken dudes that, 1, they can't express themselves. 2, they don't know how to like accept affection.
Yep.
And like aren't used to hugs. And I like made that, conscious decision when I had my kids that I would hug them to the point where probably they're going to be like, seriously, Dad, stop hugging me. And I'm like,
That's where I am with mine. And I love it. Like I'm here, but like,
I'm like, if you're in therapy when you're 25 being like, my parents hugged me too much, my dad kissed me on the hug, and I'll be like, okay, I'll take that.
Oh yeah. Like he's too cool. He's 6 now. And so he's like, he only lip kissed me like in private. Right. And I'm like, I'm still getting him.
I'm like right here.
Yeah. And then I go to the cheek and I'm like, I'm moving foreheads, but like we are hugging, cuddling, snug. Like we are like inseparable. And I'm like, no, like this, you get to cry. Like we cry together. Yeah. Like it's when and I'll be in the car, I'll get a bad phone call, he'll be in the back seat and I'll cry. And he's like, Daddy, why are you crying? I'm like, oh, I'm sad. And I'll tell him why I'm sad and like how I'm thinking about it and why I'm feeling that way. And like, I love that. Yeah. Like it just, and it even goes to like the earlier conversation. Like that's what I look at entrepreneurs as, like whether you have kids or not, like you get to have that impact on humans every day. Like that's the permission slip that you're writing through your business, through your coaching, through your content.
Are you still coaching people? I mean, I know you do the Lighthouse.
That's all I do.
So you're doing executive coaching.
That's
and
it.
Like, okay.
That's it. My job, like I believe in people and I want people to understand how great they are. And I am totally fine being behind the curtain and celebrating their wins. And like that, there's nothing in the world that makes me happier than being with somebody who gets it and realizes how great they are and having somebody in their corner that'll go to war with them. Like, just like you do. Like, that's all I care about, because when you get that it's not about the content or the podcast or how you sell or how you speak on stage, but it's how you see yourself when you perform those games. Like when you really get that and you find people in the area that will work on that with you, you're untouchable. It's just a matter of when, not if, right? And I think that's what matters. But the beautiful thing about business is it's the easiest place to diagnose, because we can see your behaviors in your email and in your content and in your customers, right? And I think that's one of the greatest gifts of entrepreneurship. It's fucking 20 years of therapy every day.
Sure.
You just have to be willing to look at it like that, right? And it took me years to realize that every time that something breaks during the day, it's a check engine light so I can fix it for the future.
So people can reach out to you if they need coaching at
I'll tell everybody where. Yeah. So here's the thing. Like my big specialty is helping people scale their companies, right? Like I've scaled every company you can imagine, from physical product to digital product, but it's because we work on the relationships, the one with you, the one with your customers. And it just so happens that I'm one of the best marketers. So we use email marketing and customer journey and all of those tools to do that. And everybody wins. Like our company philosophy is simple. Me and my team are easy. Our job is to help you. That's it. We believe that you should win before we win, because that's how teams are made, right? And so more than anything for me, and I'm going to say this to everybody listening, John, if you even had a thought of like, I want to talk, I want to connect. This isn't about numbers. This isn't about coaching. This isn't about anything. It's just you answering the call. Shoot us a DM on Instagram, go to the website, come to the event, listen to a podcast, any question you have, anything you need. My team and I will literally respond and help with anything, but you have to take the first step, because it's not about coming to the event. It's not about coming to my podcast. It's about something in this podcast today landed. Like one thing out of today's whole show for everybody listening landed. And they're like, oh, that thing. You win when you stop this show and you go put that one thing into practice, and you reach out the moment you have it in practice, because that means that you've already won and you're already on the path. And that's how I recommend people do this. Like, listen to these shows, put something in, and then get creative and go try it, go lean in and go put it into practice. And our podcast, and John will tell you this, he's listened to them and he's been at my events. We don't hide anything. We share everything for free.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Like, here it is. You don't have to pay us for anything. Take this information. I listen to your to the shorter podcast, and there's always something I take away that I'm like, fuck, this is so good. And I'll write it down and I try to implement. Yeah.
And so here's what I'm going to say. A couple of reminders to people listening, because like this show is an incredible show. I listen to this show as well. And John, your perspective and the way that you ask quit, the greatest coaches in the world give you one thing, and they give you the ability to change how you think. And that's it. The greatest coaches just get you to think differently, to ask questions differently, to see things differently, because that's how you find your path. And so when you have those things in your environment, surround yourself with them, but be protective of them. Don't consume other stuff, right? If something from this show landed today, take it. Just keep listening to this podcast and John's other shows, but protect it and don't listen to anything else until that's put into practice. Like, that's how you put these reps into place. And so our podcast covers mindset, customer journey, and relationships. That's with you, your team. Mindset is your commitments, your behaviors, and customer journey is everything marketing. We teach it for free.
If you guys have an opportunity to come to Lighthouse, I'm speaking, but to hear George weave and go through the customer journey stuff, it like crystallized anything that I knew about business and, more importantly, outreach. And I'm not good at it.
Yeah.
I know I'm the worst marketer in the world. I just am. I like, it's just because like things are happening, and then like 10 minutes later, I'm like, man, I should have videoed that. I should have like I almost need like somebody like hiding behind me, just taking pictures.
Bro, I had one for years. It's the only way.
It's the only way because I'm so stuck in the moment.
Yeah.
And like these interactions, and then you're like, oh fuck, that was really cool. I wish I had that. Or like the amount of times I've had things and all of a sudden get home and realize like, oh shit, I didn't take a picture of that.
Yeah.
I can't believe we just didn't hand a camera to the waitress to say,
exactly.
Hey, shoot a group picture. And I remember, I think it was, it might even, I forgot who, maybe it was Matt Vincent and I were talking, and he's like, dude, you do so much cool shit that you don't share with the world. And I was like, well, I'm kind of selfish. Do people want to? He's like, fuck yes. He's like, if I'm in the toilet naked, I'm going to take a picture and send it to somebody.
He does.
And he does. And he's like, I share everything with people. And I mean, it's an incredible platform, and it's very freeing, and I get it. I don't know if I'm wired up to remember to do it all the time.
Yeah. And here's what I'll say. And you don't have to be, right? You are the greatest marketer when you care about relationships, because the rest of it is just guessing and testing. That's it, right? Yeah. It's just like being a husband. You can pretend to know, but you're going to get about 80% of it. And the rest of it is recovering after she punches you in the mouth.
The best piece of advice I ever heard was you have to continuously date your wife.
Yeah.
And I find myself failing on that constantly, where like, you know, you get stuck in this deal. And I remember like, I have to be like, hey, so when are we going to go out on a date, or let's try, or I'll send her a restaurant, like, hey, let's book a reservation, or like, and I think you have to continue to date your wife, or that's my
You do. And the thing for me, and the correlation is you have to continue to date yourself as an entrepreneur, right? Yeah. And in this business, right? And it's really about what you surround yourself with. So at our event, right, customer journey for me, if you have a physical product, a digital product, a service, it's really helping you scale your business by getting people results, and we automate the process. I've spent 20 years.
Dude, your talk, not to say I've looked at everybody's stuff, but I did enough to have an understanding of what I was seeing. And it was worth the ticket price of admission.
Oh, yeah.
It was fucking, that piece alone, I was like, shit, dude, if I left here right now and there was nothing else.
Yeah.
I'm good.
And so for everybody, like, go check it out. Like, there's videos on the page. Everybody's real. They tell you what we cover at the event. We're open about it. We work on your mindset. We do things like breath work. We talk about your systems, your structure, how you communicate with your team, how to do your marketing better. And we do it all in 3 days together as a community. And the tickets are $600.
Yeah, no, it's cheap, dude.
And so, yeah, it's at mindofgeorge.com/event.
10 gel blasters that were worth way over $600.
Oh, yeah. I always give swag bags that are worth more than the tickets, so nobody can say anything to me.
Yeah, it's gonna be a blast. I'm so honored and blessed that you'd invite me to come speak.
Oh, dude, I'm honored. So the date, I don't remember the exact dates, but it's in November in Whitefish, Montana, the next one.
Can't think of a better place.
There's a couple tickets left. We open them up. So I think there's like probably 15 or 20 left, but I'm stoked. You're speaking, me and my buddy Mo, short form content, we're going to hit customer journey mindset. Like, we have the best rock, paper, scissors championship in the world, by the way, too.
And that whole deal where everybody had their eyes closed and calling out numbers. To this day, one of the coolest things. I have it written down. I want to try to, like, at some point.
It's so good.
Like, reboot it, but no, it's great, dude. If you guys, it's great. If you can go to George's website, and if you want to come hang out with me and the guys, it's fucking great.
Yeah. So I'd love to have you. And then obviously my podcast on my website too. It's mindofgeorge.com, but the show is called The Mind of George Show. If you want my Instagram, it's George Bryant. But if you DM me anything, event, customer journey, we will help you. We will support you. We have resources galore. We have free, like, literally lead magnets that take you through everything customer journey. We help you with mindset. Anything we have, just reach out and we will do anything we can to help.
Well, you heard it here first. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks
George.
For having me.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
See you. Another episode of Power at the Radio. See you.
Bye.